you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 17th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend Peter Parker. Smash the like, share, and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. So, you're quirkless. It felt like a strange thing to ask, even disrespectful, but Melissa took it in stride. Yeah, but it isn't the worst thing in the world, Melissa said, leading the two of them through the crowds. I can still work. I can still learn. Being quirkless doesn't mean that I can't do either of those. Alright, Izuku said. He couldn't help but pause for a bit. After all the work that he put in with Edge Shot, All Might, and even Parker to some degree, imagining himself without one for all seemed like an impossibility. Almost as impossible as it was as becoming a hero back before he met All Might. The idea really made him think, would he have gotten Melissa's outlook if he hadn't been given one for all? Yeah, he would, because even without a quirk, someone that mattered said he could be a hero. Yes, thank almighty God yehahahis. Izuku flinched, and Melissa stopped in her tracks at the English declaration. With it came a sight that made Izuku think he was seeing things upon noticing the duo standing in the food court. Yet after he blinked, the sight was still there. Peter on his knees, holding a bitten-into-meat sandwich with cheese and grilled onions of some kind, as if he was holding it before God, while Todoroki, a woman with white hair and red highlights, Hatsune and Yaoyorozu ate what looked like a cheesecake without a care in the world. Wait, what were Parker, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu and Hatsune doing here on the island? Peter-san, Izuku blurted out in Japanese. Melissa perked up. Oh, you know him. The others turned, and the white-haired woman nudged Todoroki. He seems awfully happy, she said in Japanese. It's genuine. It's real. It's not teppanyaki or teriyaki, it's honest to God. Peter seemed to breathe, tracing a finger along the bread. Marinated and sauteed steak, cooked beside grilled onions over a flat-top grill. Okay, he was acting overly creepy, with cheese whiz enhancing the flavor of the onions and the meat for an all-natural oju. He gulped, sniffing. Then he perked up, blinking as he looked around. The others followed his gaze, and Izuku felt many eyes upon him. Midori, Peter asked. Oh, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu waved, beaming. Todoroki seemed to blink. Is everyone in our class on this island? He seemed to ask aloud, sounding a little flustered. Oh, that's the kid you fought, Shoto. Fayumi waved. Hello there. Midoriya Izuku was it? I'm Todoroki Fayumi, Shoto's big sister. Are those your friends from UA? Melissa asked, surprised and intrigued as Izuku looked back, dumbly nodding as Peter stood up, fingering his ear a little and looking sheepish. Why yeah, hi everyone. It's good to see you all here, Izuku said, walking forward with Melissa by his side as Peter set down his sandwich on the table beside his seat next to Yaoyorozu. What are you doing here, Midori? Peter asked in Japanese before looking upon the taller blonde beside the green-haired boy. He blinked. Can she understand us? Crystal clear, Melissa responded in Japanese, Peter perking up. Well, he reverted to English. Your Japanese is a lot better than mine. He held out his hand to shake. Peter Parker, I'm Midori. Izuku Midoriya's classmate back in Japan. Transfer student from good old Queens. Oh, you're American. Melissa shook his hand happily. Melissa Shield. Born in Los Angeles, but raised here for most of my entire life. She put her hands behind her back and beamed. It's really nice to see more of Izu's friends here. Izu. She was calling him by a nickname too now. Izuku looked flustered, fiddling with his fingers. Shield. Are you David Shield's daughter by chance? Todoroki spoke in accented English. The glasses-wearing girl nodded. Yep, he's my old man. Should be catching up with All Might by now too. Suddenly Izuku could feel the eyes of everyone on him, Todoroki and Peter especially. You flew here with All Might sensei? Peter asked in Japanese with a tilt to his head. Ooh, yeah, Izuku stammered. He had a meeting with Shield-san and all that, so he decided to bring me here to have a little fun. Izuku left out the bits regarding training. Todoroki and Peter's eyes seemed to narrow, but when Izuku looked at them, the look was gone so fast he could have just been imagining it. Aw, who cares? Peter said with a grin. It's good to see you, man. Why yeah, you too. But it's better to see this, Peter said, pointing at his sandwich. You have no idea how much I've missed you. He whispered before biting in and moaning at the taste. Hatsune simply tilted her head like a dog while Momo giggled. Izuku couldn't help but nervously chuckle at his classmate's antics. Beside him, Todoroki stopped midway to the trash can. Be careful, he's been evaluating his friendships based on food lately. What? He's joking, Fayumi said, with a small smile. Izuku felt very confused. Don't worry Midori, Peter said after he swallowed. I'm just killing time till the expo. His eyes seemed to cloud over, and once it's done, hopefully she'll be done asking to show off her babies. Izuku opened his mouth to question that statement, but Shoto and Peter both pointed to an oblivious Mei, which instantly cleared the story for Izuku, and from the look on her face, Yaoyorozu as well. Well, if we're just going to be killing time, we better do it the right way, Melissa declared with a big grin. Obviously, everyone's invited. That's very generous of you, Yaoyorozu said. It's nothing, Melissa said. I know the best spots, and I wouldn't be much of a shield if I couldn't show my way around an expo. We're in, Fayumi said, earning her a small glare from her brother. And just like that, they were in. Melissa had a cheeky grin as she adjusted her glasses, standing proud with a hand on her hip. Hope you're ready for a day at one of the best theme parks in the world. Teca Mechanica. It was a dark and expansive road, with many tall walls, stone debris, and flashing lights as overhead. Police blimps soared over the skies with their searchlights, until blaster fire rang out, causing a car to flare bright red and crunch up. A red assailant leapt through the air, firing his rifle down as laser beams seared out. As the car folded and crumpled, two people in blue bolted out of cover, one rolling with a feminine yelp to the side, the other exiting in a more controlled manner, lightning arcing around him as he fired his pistols. The red man, Peter Parker, landed and aimed, firing still as a laser stroked his calf, causing his suit to clench up at the damage. He dodged, leaping off the wall and retreating as the blue man gave chase. Suddenly, he got a laser pointer right in his vision from the side of the road, causing him to flinch before he felt his chest vibrate and tighten up. He'd been hit. Now halt right there gangsters, came a proud female voice, whose owner held a laser rifle and was dressed in green highlights as she aimed, firing on rapid fire. Oh come on, hit, sis, you have to be calm here, dryly pointed out her compatriot, also in green as he poked his head out of cover. Green girl, Todoroki Fayumi, looked back with a frown. Whoop whoop, that's da sound of da beast. Peter laughed in English as he leapt high, aiming down and firing as laser bolts erupted. Shoto tugged his sister back behind cover and sprouted in. Ice wall. Oh come on Shoto, that's against the rules. You're using your quirk too obviously. Fayumi yelled back as Peter sighed, before he felt a tingle and leapt up, avoiding additional blue laser fire. Blue man leapt over the obstacles as he used his quirk, glowing green. Peter dodged each one, but felt another shiver down his spine and fell to the floor, avoiding a barrage of blue bolts from his flank. Blue girl had flanked him. Gotta bait them, Peter whispered before he broke into a run, panting as he could hear Izuku giving chase. Terran, can't you give a guy a break here? He whispered harshly into his ear. And a heads up, I could, but I'm feeling rather amused seeing all of this from the camera footage. Oh great, Karen had gotten a sense of humor now. Was that a joke? Maybe. Peter saw a laser pointer on the wall and turned, seeing his comrade, Red Girl, wave as he turned about and leapt away. He's taking to the wall. Melissa, Izuku called out. On it, Melissa yelled back as Peter felt his vest clench up. Heck, got hit again. He leapt down to the floor and took off, looking back and seeing Izuku get a bead on him. He leapt side to side on the wall, moving erratically to avoid being hit before he turned back and returned fire. His vest vibrated and clenched up, and his headset went dead, with the big red words "Game Over" on display. Aw dang it, Peter exclaimed, looking around as his headset saw Shoto and Fayumi across the augmented virtual reality room, or AVRR, with their laser tag guns aimed in his direction. Alright, I got him. He heard Izuku cheer, before Peter heard him yelp and fall down. Ah, my shoe. It's sticky. Parker-san, why did you web me here? That wasn't. Peter was cut off when he heard Fayumi yelp in surprise, seeing Momo able to take them out as Peter saw in his headset their HP counters drop to 0. The headset also had X-ray vision for players who were knocked out of the game, as the walls had a material that was transparent in the lens of this kind of technology, and he saw that Momo had been able to flank the two while he was being pinned down by Izuku, and she was able to get the green players. Wait a minute. Melissa, be careful, Izuku called out. Come on, stupid web. He saw Melissa freeze up as she trotted forward to catch up, but Momo was in motion from her position, aiming up at Izuku and firing her laser rifle multiple times. Izuku yelped and took a hit to the head before he lied down to avoid getting hit. Peter saw Momo shoulder her rifle, take a running start and conjured a step stool of some kind. which was stopped by the straps of her harness and vibration pads around her casual blouse. Oh no, she yelled, stopping and trying to get the stool out. Momo, 3 o'clock. Peter yelled out as Momo turned right, and Melissa was right there. Say hello to my little friend, Melissa yelled, firing rapidly as she held down the trigger on her laser gun. Momo yelped and got struck, and Peter saw her health go down, and the bright words "Blue Team, Victory" appeared in his HUD as the room brightened up. Peter took off the headset, and the room was a bright white with all the gothic buildings and dark skies gone, and in its place was a simple plain white material that emulated brick walls, cars, and buildings, and a ceiling filled with orbs and receptors that displayed the holographic virtual reality tech. All right, we won, Izu, Melissa chirped proudly as the walls began to shrink down to the floor, eventually leveling off the room to make it entirely flat. We won. Oh, we won, Izuku declared as he sat on the floor, white webbing still anchoring his soul to the floor. Whoa, that was so cool. And so lifelike too, to think all of this turned into buildings in the virtual simulation. Here, let me help, Fayumi said as she came over, kneeling down and some fire emitting from her fingertips like a blowtorch as she emitted quick little bursts, and the webbing was gone. So who got who anyway? Shoto asked as he approached. A big black video board was off to the side, displaying the point totals. Peter looked over, and he scratched his cheek. Momo got the most points, given her takedowns of Shoto and Fayumi, but Melissa was on her tail, followed by Shoto strangely enough, and he was dead last, below Fayumi and Izuku. He heard a sad trumpet sound of wah wah wah, a play in his ear. He rolled his eyes and looked down at his smartwatch, seeing a laughing emoji displayed there. Very funny, Karen. So, death to fear next? Peter asked, forcing a smile as he remembered that big awesome roller coaster close by. Death to fear? Shoto asked. The roller coaster, Shoto, his sister clarified. The dual-eyed boy gave it a long thought, utterly oblivious to the pleading look Midoriya was giving him. I don't see why not, he said, though it sounded like a question. But it wasn't a no, so Peter was taking it. Heck yeah, that's the spirit, Shoto, Melissa said. Shoto shrugged, as if it wasn't that big of a deal. I suppose I can try it out. And with him that's 5-1, May exclaimed, and Izuku let out a whine. Why, you're sure this is safe? Izuku asked, looking nervous. Yeah, why wouldn't it be? Melissa asked. Izuku glanced outside the little room, to the open sky and then to the floor that started to open. And no reason, he stuttered. Right before the door opened, and the indoor anti-grav skydive let the teenagers truly feel like they were flying. Half of them screaming, the other half laughing. Am I doing this right? Momo asked. Peter leaned over her shoulder. Have you tried just mashing buttons? Momo raised an eyebrow. Doesn't that defeat the purpose? She asked. Momo-san, it's a fighting game. The purpose is to have fun before winning. And besides, Melissa said, anything's better than nothing with May on the other console. The three teenagers all glanced to May, who was inputting controls faster than any of them could ever hope to accomplish, fingers flying across a dashboard while the other handled a joystick. On stage, twin practice mechs smashed against one another in a field of metal and circuitry. Or, one did a 5-hit combo that ended with a haymaker which made the head of Momo's mech launch off of it. I win, May declared. Oh, I can see all the servos and gears in there. Oh, and is that she sniffed the air a little. Premium grade petrol. Shoto and Fayumi looked back at Peter, who shrugged as Izuku was wide-eyed with Momo. Melissa giggled as May climbed over the ledge to get a look at the destroyed robot. Peter and co. were already on the move. Chuga 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 chuga, Peter muttered as he held onto the handlebars as they went up at a 90-degree angle. You're acting like a train. Huh? Melissa laughed from behind him. He could barely make out the sound of Izuku's whimpering. He looked over, seeing May just looking around at the track to see the various gears and magnet bumpers, and to his left, Momo bit her lip in tense excitement. Come on, Shoto, gimme a reaction for your big sister, said Fayumi from up front as they were nearing the top. I'm good, Shoto replied stoically as Peter grinned before they reached the tippy top of the coaster, and the utter jungle of twists, loopy loops, and upside-down bits they would soon experience. Choo-choo-wow, Peter yelled as they went down, blazing fast as Izuku yelled in utter terror. Melissa and Peter whooped and hollered. Momo and May were silent for differing reasons as Peter could barely make out May's head on a swivel looking around. Fayumi let out surprised and shocked yelps, laughing as they traveled along the death to fear. Shoto remained stone-faced if the post-ride photograph was any indication. No. Oh come on Midori, this is gonna be the best ride of the day. No means no. It's just a ride based on an old movie, Melissa said. It's gonna be okay, Izu. You can ride with me. Izuku could feel his eyebrow twitch, but unfortunately for him, the rest of the group had already went in. We saw this at our mansion once. Peter-san seemed to enjoy it quite a lot, Momo said as Peter let out a laugh. Love it, and it's based off of the second one too. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward and prayed that the ride wasn't nearly as scary as the name implied. Shouldn't be as scary. Alright, not after the Mummy's Revenge or Rise of the Machines. Hearing the screams inside as he took a step and confirmed it, Izuku closed his eyes, gulping, and wished he was fighting a villain. He heard growling and looked up, seeing a shadow move and a scaly black claw poke out of a vent, along with a chattering growl. It may have been an animatronic. Wait for me. And he rushed inside, the flashing sign of aliens, the ride blazing above within a giant dome the size of the USJ. It was the end of the day as the sun set. Peter let out a deep sigh of relief as he and the group walked out of Tekka Mechanica's gates and back into the entertainment district. That was a blast, he said, grinning as he wore his new t-shirt with the theme park's logo and background. Fayumi let out a laugh. Wow, I haven't had this much fun in ages. I'm glad you had fun, sis. Shoto replied softly, wearing a hat with a big eye on it. You smiled a few times back there. Fayumi elbowed her little brother. I saw that lip of yours raise. Like that dark ride where we shot all those scary mummies. Oh, and when we exited the facility after blowing up the alien queen. Izuku let out a tired groan, being guided out and right next to Melissa. I think Izu's had enough excitement for one day. The blonde laughed, closing her eyes. Bugs. So many. Bugs. He uttered weakly. Aliens. Facehuggers. GNNGH. He really wasn't into horror movies, and Peter felt a little guilty. To be fair, he was afraid of heights once. Now, he longed for them. I think they're called scarabs, Midori. Peter corrected. I got creeped out by them when I watched The Mummy when I was a kid too. Reminds me of London Disney World a little. Momo added as she was dressed in a brand new t-shirt with TECCA written over the chest. Her blouse was in her purse, thanks to her being in the splash zone of the Hydra ride. She had a grin as well. Lots of advanced rides with their application of VR, R, and unique and advanced engineering in the coasters. You seem like you know a thing or two about theme parks there, Yaoyorozu-san, Melissa said as the black-haired beauty looked back at the blonde. I've been to several around the world. Universal Studios Dakar to me stands out as amongst the best, even if the arid weather is inconvenient. Momo elaborated. There's a Universal Studios in Dakar and a Disney World in London. Whoa, Peter mused to himself, sighing and smiling as he looked ahead. Would love to check those out someday. Such a thing would be rare. Shoto commented. We are heroes. Attending theme parks such as these is a luxury. But did you have fun today, bro? Fayumi asked. Shoto was unsure to answer, looking to the side. Mei hummed happily, writing notes in her phone as she carried a bag of t-shirts all bundled up. Wait, she bought t-shirts. Hey Mei, when did you get all of these shirts? When you guys were in laser tag. Mei replied. Huh, nice. Peter smiled. Guess this fish out of water is getting its sea legs in. The pink-haired girl tilted her head, grin ever present. Fish don't have legs, silly. And I needed more shirts for class and work when we get home. I was running a little low, Mei said without a care. Oh, nice shirts getting all mucked up. Then again, it is Mei. Got some to keep though, for around the house. Mei mused, holding out the Tekka Mechanica brand shirts. Look like good PJs too. Peter then noticed something in her bag as he leaned over. The other shirts down there were the Splash Zone spare shirts they got complimentary of the park. All bland and white. So the rest down there are work grubs. I can get these dirty no sweat. Mei replied with a grin, then her eyes zoomed in on something and her grin only seemed to widen slightly. Peter couldn't help but return it in kind. Man, with all the schooling and making projects, I needed this distraction. Melissa stretched. I'm glad you all had fun today. I hope I served as a lovely tour guide. She winked, bowing lightly. You were great. Thank you so much again, Shield-san. Fayumi bowed lightly, as did Shoto. Thank you. Yes, I had a lovely time here. Momo smiled, hand upon her chest. I've heard rumors on Tekka Mechanica's quality, but it seems like the hype was justified here. Well, I'm glad we didn't disappoint. Island may be an island of research and development, but we know when to party hard too. Melissa looked over to the pale and sunk-faced Izuku. Boy looked like a zombie. Maybe we shouldn't take him on coasters next time. Peter mused aloud, or the horror rides. Did the countless photos we have of his reactions not give it away? Momo asked Riley. Peter was looking back and forth, seeing Mei's gaze shift from the hover monorail to following some cleaning robots, causing some people to stare. She wasn't going far at least. So, where are you all staying at? Melissa asked. Harriet, on the other side of the island near I Tower. Fayumi elaborated as she yawned. Me and Shoto are a little pooped though. We'll have some restaurant food before we rest for tomorrow, right bro? Sounds good to me, Shoto replied. I'm at the built-in with May over on. Peter grabbed his phone, checking out the address before relaying it to the group. I'm over in that direction. Wanna head over together? Momo asked. She did notice Shoto's glacier early today. Sounds good. Peter grinned. Melissa beamed at the rest of the gang. So, are you all attending the gala and expo tomorrow? Yeah, can't wait to check it out, Peter exclaimed. May is too, but hey. Oh crap, May was climbing a pole now. Hatsune, get down from there. There's a drone up here. I just need a better look-see. Don't you worry, Peter. Oh dear, Momo sighed. Should we meet up again at the expo tomorrow? If we don't have any meetings. Shoto, will you let Yaoyorozu-san know ASAP? Fayumi asked. Yeah, he said, grabbing his phone. Well, in that case, see you then, Momo said. She waved at the group, and followed the fairly obvious sounds of Peter watching May getting pulled off the pole by a security drone. Got her by the scruff of her shirt no less, like one grabbing the scruff of a cat. Having trouble? She asked, and Peter sighed. Oh relax, she can't be the only one that does this sort of. The black-haired beauty's voice trailed off as May, in full view of the drone, started taking measurements, even as it dropped her onto the ground and tried to float away. But the girl kept hugging it, trying to measure it once more as it dragged the giggling girl away. Peter gave the rich girl a sideways look with a tilted head her way. I stand corrected, Momo admitted. Up into whatif, May chortled, riding the drone as it made an alarm, making the two teens pale and run after her. Heh, now I got something to write home about. Wolfram turned his eyes to the doorway, where steam billowed out of the bathroom door. One of his subordinates standing there gestured to the little robot inside that was proceeding to neatly fold the discarded clothes and place them in the laundry bin. Little robots that offer turn-down service. The Merc leader let out a closed-mouthed chuckle, a thought shared with his henchmen as they too let out small amounts of laughter, before turning his eyes back to his laptop. Full room and board, good food, warm beds, and by the end of it all he gets paid twice over. Damn good deal if he had anything to say about it. He scrolled over the blueprints and building plans one more time, running them through his head as he went over the plan in his head one more time. The layout of a tower, the tunnels leading to it, the right places to hit, hold, and to get away once they got the package. There was a knock at the door, and the few of his men in the suite currently spread around the room drew their handguns and prepared their quirks, looking at the doorway. Yeah, he called. Open the hell up, it's me. Wolfram lifted his head, gesturing to the door, and one of his men stood to open it, allowing a willowy brown-haired woman to step on through. Next to her was a hulking figure, too large to properly fit through the door and needed to lean down and maneuver her shoulders to pass through the barrier. Her skin was a pale gray, her eyes a beady black, and Wolfram noted the long mane of black hair down her shoulders as she was dressed in a hoodie and cargo pants, and wore a breathing mask over her clearly non-human face. Ah yes, the deadman's hand. Wolfram, she greeted him with a smirk. Got something to report? He asked, sitting in his chair. Oh, not much. She smiled, cocking one hip. Tagged some of the bigger names walking round the island. You finally get confirmation on who the top 10 hero from Japan is. Didn't see any of them out there when I made my rounds. And it is what you called me for. Actually I did. He drawled, clicking a key on his laptop. None other than the big man himself. He then turned the laptop towards her. He saw her face twitch, her cocky smile almost faltering. Her partner's eyes widened as Wolfram kept up the confident smirk. No one really wanted to take on All Might. No one had ever beaten the guy. Wolfram snorted and shrugged. Ah well, we had plans in place for All Might anyway. It's the others that would worry me. You aren't worried about the symbol of peace, but you are worried about the rest of the peanut gallery. The bigger woman asked, his voice incredibly low and deep, fitting for her appearance. Wolfram stood up from his chair. Didn't you get the memo? Mr. Shield is his friend. Former sidekick when he was making his debut in the US. Hitting this place was always gonna bring the #1 around sooner or later. So I planned around Mr. All Smiles, so leave him to me. His smirk faded as he crossed his arms. The others though, too many to plan around for, too varied. Hence where you come in. This doesn't change the deal. The woman narrowed her eyes before he raised his hand in assurance. Don't worry, you'll get your cut, he affirmed. Couldn't have her throw a wrench in his plans now if she felt like she was getting burned. A little bit of money was nothing next to the real prize he was aiming for. So, tell me, who else did you tag around this place? Ruby Kane scoffed, smirked, bringing her hand up to pull free the eye patch over her eye. Some real interesting prospects. We are sorry, but due to the incoming storm, we will be grounded until the weather clears, which may not be until tomorrow. We will dispatch buses to take you to the nearest hotel courtesy of our airline. "Thank you for your patience and we apologize for this inconvenience," said the woman over the intercom, and Todoroki Inji, dressed in public clothes, did his best not to let out his flames through where his normal fiery facial hair would be. He sighed heavily through this nose as he heard collective groans from people around him. Give Shoto and Fayumi the private jet, and he would take a separate plane. Problem is he chose commercial, because why not? Surely it wouldn't be that bad. But summer was typhoon season, and Narita Airport was getting hammered by a tropical storm. He sat in the terminal lobby, arms crossed over his broad body as he saw some youngsters looking his way, one of them even sucking their thumb. He took a deep breath and sighed, looking up. Never flying commercial, ever, the hero known as Endeavor muttered under his breath. From the holo TV screen high above, he could see the Doppler of the massive storm. It would dissipate by tomorrow. This is stupid. It wasn't the first time that the words had left his lips or run through his mind. It had been that way ever since his old man walked out of his room. More than once he'd nearly talked himself out of this bullshit. But stubbornly, stupidly, he always forced himself to keep moving forward, which brought him ever closer to where he was now. Right outside of Deku's apartment complex, on a muggy day with patches of rain clouds no less. He hadn't walked in. As he left his house, as he got on the train, as he walked the city blocks, drawing ever closer and closer, his anxiety had risen in his gut, coiling round and round his stomach and tightening until he felt like he'd be sick. He wasn't scared of fights. He'd never back down from conflict, and he got in everyone's faces when he needed to, didn't matter who it was. But somehow, some way, just the thought of looking at Midoriya and Co made him sick to his stomach. He wasn't sure how long he'd been standing there, just staring at the building with its merry little balcony gardens and light green shadings, looking entirely too peaceful for how the sight of it alone made him feel. "This is stupid," Katsuki repeated, snarling at himself. He turned away, and found himself staring straight at the woman he'd been dreading to see. Midoriya and Co stood there, grocery bag in hand, an inscrutable menagerie of emotions on her face as she looked at him, while he could only imagine the deer in the headlights look that decorated his own features. She was gripping her keys in her hand, little metal strips clinking in her grip. Her surprise faded, and her eyes narrowed. "Bakugou-san," she said, and her voice was colder than icy hot frost. Katsuki shifted where he stood, and he was big enough to admit that he was fidgeting. "Can we talk?" he finally bit out. Never one to beat around the bush anyway, and it was clear that she didn't want to see him more than absolutely necessary. She shifted her weight, both hands gripping the grocery bag in front of her, feet shoulder-width apart as she stared him down, and somehow Katsuki felt immeasurably small under her gaze. "Talk then." He blinked. "Out here. You're not welcome in my home," she hissed. That stung a lot more than it should have. He looked away, trying to find it in himself to be angry at the woman, but discovering that the constant well of easily accessible fury had abandoned him, evaporating under her icy gaze. Just get it over with. When did Deku find out about his damn quirk? It was the wrong thing to say. He knew it the second the words left his mouth, and the way her features closed, like the shutting of a great iron gate, had just confirmed it. "After everything, that's what you've come to say to me." The rage on her face and her voice made him wince, hitting him almost like a physical blow. "Go to hell." She moved to march past him, and before his brain had fully caught up with him, his legs had brought him to stand in front of her. Wait. She did, but the look on her normally gentle features told him that the plump woman was just about ready to move straight through him if he said one more wrong word. Katsuki felt the muscles in his jaw jump, his throat dry, and it was a struggle to maintain eye contact. "Look, I don't know what Deku told you, boo." Again, he stepped on a verbal landmine, and when Inko interrupted him, his usual tactic of shouting over the person in question didn't even enter the foggiest corner of his mind. "Are you going to try to tell me he lied? That I've got it all wrong? Despite everything, Bakugou, I still thought you weren't an outright liar." His teeth ground together. How fucking bad did Deku paint the goddamn picture? He didn't say anything, she shouted, cutting him off again. "I have eyes, Katsuki. I have ears. I saw my son coming home with burn marks. I heard other kids laughing when they mentioned my son's name and saying what you did to him when they thought no one could hear them." Katsuki found himself blinking, staring down at the shorter woman. "He never told you." She shook her head. "He never had the heart to. Somewhere deep down, for a reason I cannot fathom. My little boy always wanted to be your friend again when you were children. So he never did." They fell into silence for a moment. He'd never told her. He figured Deku'd just been lying when he said that, like he'd been lying about his quirk. "Why didn't you ever say anything to my parents?" For the first time since the conversation began, Inko seemed to shrivel in on herself, shame and guilt writhing in her like a worm. I'm not a brave woman, Katsuki. I haven't been a good mother, just as you've never been a good friend. There were times I attempted to call your parents, more than I can recall. But I always backed down, always gave some excuse, some stupid rationalization. Maybe he'll change. Maybe it's just a phase. Maybe Masaru and Mitsuki know and they just don't care. Or they won't care. Always I found ways to say no, reasons to not pick up the phone. Katsuki felt his fingers twitch, tightening his hands into fists as the bones cracked and popped. And after the tests, why not say anything then? You wanted to. You had a chance to. So why? She looked to him, tears brimming in her eyes that she stubbornly refused to let fall in front of him. My son was happy. That statement left him speechless. A poor mother and a worse friend. That's all my boys had in life, and she cut herself off, and Katsuki felt his insides contort as his jaw clenched up. And so when I saw his joy, she smiled a bit, staring at the ground as her eyes continued to glisten. I do my damnedest not to ruin it, even if I hate it. When he found his quirk, it made him happy. It let him follow his dream. And when he saw your parents again, got to talk to them again, it made him happier. Believe me, it wasn't for you or for me that I kept quiet. Katsuki snarled, fists clenched. Why the hell didn't he just say he had a fucking quirk to start with? It didn't make sense. Deku admired All Might as much as he did. He would have been through the roof just like himself if he had a quirk like the symbol of peace. Why fucking hide I? Even if you would have known about the quirk, it shouldn't have mattered. Inko screamed at him, and the force of her anger was enough to make him take a step back. You were his hero, Katsuki. He looked up to you, and when you thought he was quirkless, you thought you could throw it all away because he didn't matter. My boy is worth more than any quirk. She was breathing heavy, shoulders rising and falling, her face flush with anger. And if you still can't see that, Inko spoke softer now, but still with an undercurrent of bandied steel, then you can still go to hell. She met his gaze fiercely, tears still brimming along her eyes, but she still refused to let them fall. As if to compensate, a mild drizzle began to come down the moment the sun was blocked out by a passing rain cloud. Now please excuse me. I have to put these in the refrigerator before they spoil. It wasn't a request. Katsuki stepped out of her way as she marched past him without another word or a backward glance, standing in the rain as it began to fall. The sun's rays poking in were what woke Peter from his slumber as he sat up, rubbing his eyes and looking at the clock. It read 6:30 a.m., which gave him plenty of time to get breakfast, slip on some clothes, and get prepared for May's little showcase. He got up, stretching as he looked over at his suitcase. He'd brought along two of them, one containing his normal clothes, the other holding his formal attire. He turned, pulling open the curtains and seeing the sun rise over Island's walls. He still couldn't believe that he'd ran into Momo, Midori, and the Todoroki siblings too. Talk about crazy. He grabbed his clothes to wear to the restaurant downstairs and went into the shower, washing up and before long, coming out dry and groomed. Okay, time to check on her. He walked through his room, entered the luxury suite's living room and the wide open door at the other side. Guess May was up. Hiya, Peter. He saw May poke her head out from the ceiling. May, why are you on the ceiling? He asked as he walked closer, seeing her on her hands and knees on the ceiling. Her hands had some special gloves on them, and on her knees were some knee pads. Just testing some of my babies before we go show 'em off. Peter noticed a trail of her babies in her room. Good God, it was like an explosion. Her crates were open and, how long have you been up? Peter asked, eyebrow cocked as he looked up, hands on his hips. About an hour. Why? It's gonna be a long day. I mean, going to the front of the convention, and you showing off your gadgets for all the people going in and out. Meh, I've stayed up longer. I'll be fine. May giggled as she crawled along the ceiling before she reached over to touch some buttons. Her gear turned off and she landed on her feet with a big bright grin. You get enough sleep too? Plenty. Had a lot of fun yesterday at the park. Did you? She didn't seem too wild about the rides, even if she had a big grin on her face the entire time. Was her face just locked into her having a smile? Oh yeah, saw some unique ideas from that roller coaster we went on. Oh, and that anti-grav skydive had me thinking on making babies of a similar caliber. May had her arms spread wide. It was an awesome field trip. And my baby demonstration will be even more profitable once I get. She turned, beaming as she ran over to one of her crates. Peter poked his head in, seeing her rummage around as she was still in a set of blue PJs with wrenches and screwdrivers printed on it. She trotted back with something and Peter's spider sense tingled. The brown-haired boy took a step back and avoided something hard as May swung it with great enthusiasm. In her hand was some vest, and on it, the words MHA. Just contact me for inquiry on hero support gear, followed by her phone number, email, and home address. Wait, that wasn't some random address, it was UA. I don't think giving out UA's address as your own is smart. Why? Because it's not your home address, but I spend more time there anyway. But it's still not your home. Why? Peter groaned, hand rubbing his forehead. Do you want to go get breakfast or something? He heard the growl of a stomach and looked down, and at May, who was also looking down. Oh, guess I'll need some too. I did order room service. Did you eat any? Nah, wasn't hungry. Also, the food menu choices sounded too weird. What's an eggs Benedict? You have a lot to learn. Peter mused. You take a shower before we get breakfast and then I can wear your shirt at your demonstration. The girl beamed like the sun before throwing her knee pads and gloves aside, rushing into the bathroom in a jiffy. Peter couldn't help but chuckle and smile. 4.5 miles an hour the treadmill read as Momo ran on it. She looked at her phone, which read her biological life signs of heart rate and other functions. Sweat poured down her brow and neck and onto her drenched workout t-shirt and basketball shorts. Thankfully, the hotel gym was empty, leaving her to her thoughts. Momo saw the TV up ahead show off some news reports of the tropical storms dissipating around Japan, and she felt relieved. A storm that could have been a nasty typhoon had hit Japan yesterday. If they had left Fry Island last night as originally planned, they would have been grounded. She wouldn't have gotten to see her classmates, any of them, or had as much fun as she had in the amusement park. Her mind began to wander, thinking of her classmates. Of course, immediately remembering Peter, Midoriya, and Todoroki, but also the others back home and everything that had happened so far. A lot had happened, and, quietly, she had to wonder if she'd even be here without her classmates. Certainly, without Peter's web formula, things would have been difficult. Jiru's friendship, even All Might after the, Midoriya had also saved her during their mutual final exam. Even her talk with Ida had reinforced her desire to become a hero in a way, reminding her of her own motivation. Her thoughts had enveloped her so much so she didn't hear the door open. You seem to have had fun yesterday. Momo jumped in place, startled. Oh, good morning, mother. Good morning. Maya nodded before she walked over to the mat and began to stretch, utilizing some yoga techniques. Something on your mind? Your father has the exact same look when the gears are turning in his head. Maya responded. Momo turned away, jogging as she breathed, figuring out what to say to her. I'm just considering, she admitted quietly, stepping to the edge of the treadmill. How I've become a hero. Everything that's happened. Maya said nothing, but the look she had in the mirror facing her proved she had her attention. And I was wondering if I have been going at it the wrong way. How so? She asked. Well, the treadmill was going down in speed. My classmates, all of them, have helped me, and I wonder if I wouldn't be where I am today if not for them. And if that's the case, is that wrong? That's what's on your mind? Maya asked, and Momo nodded, looking at her mother, who took a deep breath and closed her eyes, seemingly gathering patience. Momo winced. Don't be so stupid and sentimental over such things. If you find any advantage or leverage to become better at something, whether it be your profession, status, or whatever else, do not feel ashamed over using it. Use those advantages, advance and better yourself. In your case, use those to become a better hero to save others. Don't apologize over such trivial matters. Momo winced, remembering suddenly why it was so difficult to speak to the woman. And as for thinking you wouldn't be the same person or that you'd even be a hero without them, don't be ridiculous. Even without any of them, you would have gotten where you are. You have a brain, don't you? Momo felt her anger spike, but quelled it quickly. Yes. Her answer, however, was clipped, biting even as she tried to hide it. Maya looked at her, quiet for a moment. You know what I mean. Don't take it literally, Momo. The woman said, in a voice that was almost an apology. You're intelligent and resourceful enough to have gotten where you need to be on your own. Well, thanks, Momo muttered. Her mother said nothing, resuming her exercises before she finished stretching and going to a nearby pull-up bar, leaping up and doing so with ease. Momo can see the raw muscle on her mother's back, along with the countless scars and wounds of battle gained from her earlier career. Momo, she heard her mother grunt out after Momo finished her first set. Never sell yourself short. Maya paused, looking back at her through the mirror before she let go, taking a break from her rep. Yes, mother, he still wasn't here. By all accounts, that observation should have made Shoto happier. He was here, on an island full of all the greatest technologies that the world could offer, and practically given full reign on what he could do to have fun with his sister beside him. Until the meeting started, there was no expectations, no rules or traditions that he had to follow. Simply being a teenager, with his classmates of all people, was all that was expected of him. And while it was good, better than he could have thought it would be, the thought of going into a meeting such as this without his father was something of a frightening prospect. Loath as he was to admit, Endeavor was still the #2 hero in Japan for a very good reason. No ordinary man could claim that spot and keep it for years on end. It spoke of an experience, a drive, and self-control that few others had. He'd seen a bit of it, and if he was being honest, he wanted that close by when the meeting started. Yet, as if in response to some cosmic karma going against Shoto's wishes, Dad wasn't here. All there was consisted of him and his sister, preparing their formal wear like they were told. Fayumi wouldn't have to do much, just enjoy the procession as well as she could given the company that no doubt was going to be there. Well, most of the company that was going to be there. Yaoyorozu-san and Shield-san would be the sole exceptions. Everyone else, Shoto couldn't imagine them being much better company than the average politician. You finished, Shoto? Fayumi asked. Shoto blinked away his thoughts and looked himself over in the mirror. He still had the suit jacket and the tie to go. At the edge of the door, Fayumi peeked in, sighing at his state. The disappointment made him shift slightly, but she wordlessly came towards him, motioning him to turn around to face her. He complied without complaint, and it let him know exactly how long he'd been overthinking things. They only had a little bit before they would need to be worried about making it on time. Fayumi made quick work of his tie and handed him his suit coat. A quick shrug of his shoulders let him put it on, and he took a moment to double-check himself in the mirror. "Look at you," Fayumi said with a teasing grin, an up-and-coming hero ready to take on the world. "You're giving me a bit too much credit," he said, dismissively. "I'm your sister," Fayumi said. "I'm allowed to give you as much credit as I want." The corners of his lips curled a little bit upwards. "I think that I'm going to need a bit more than credit to make an impression tonight," he said, walking off. "Obviously," Fayumi said, giving his hair a quick flick of her finger, straightening a misplaced strand, "which is why I'll be looking out for you." Shoto blinked, and Fayumi shook her finger at him. "Don't give me that look," she said. "This is a big night for you, so I'm going to help." "Fayumi," Shoto said in exasperation. "There's infinitely better things that you could be doing with your time tonight." Fayumi gave him a small smile. "Shoto, there is nothing better than helping my brother." Shoto stood there for a moment. That was good to hear. Yet, there were thoughts that still stayed with him that made him ask, "What makes you think that I'll be able to make it work?" She shrugged without a care. "You'll be able to, and that's all that there is to it, right?" Again, Shoto just stood there for a moment. There was a thought, a memory of the last time he needed to make something work, make it better, but he couldn't. The nightmare of Hasu lingered in the back of his mind, along with the phantom screams and roars. Yet, it didn't matter. "Right?" he said. "Then let's get going." Fayumi said, "I know people say that you should be fashionably late, but that idea isn't true." A poor fact for their father, but Shoto declined to comment on that. Instead, he said nothing as he followed his sister, his hand fidgeting at the tie around his neck. "Peter, we've been over this. I know, but this thing makes no sense. Peter, you can figure out 98% of the circuitry to a form-fitting biosuit in an afternoon. This is a simple bow tie. ... Can I have the circuits?" Peter asked hopefully. If it were possible for a program to give him a flat look, Karen would have excelled at the task. Part of Peter wanted to argue to give him a break, but there were a million reasons that wouldn't work against someone like Karen, especially when he and May were starting to cut it a little too close for comfort. But in all fairness to him, he'd never had to tie a tie by himself. Though, that excuse didn't exactly improve his self-esteem looking at the mirror. He was dressed in formal attire, and they had to rush to put on their duds for the gala tonight, to which he and May had been invited to. They'd spent a long time at the outside of the Expo, with Peter helping May showcase her gadgets and gizmos to expo goers and other civilians. For hours on end, Peter rubbed his chest under his blue suit. May could have adjusted the harness to be a little looser. That was gonna be a rash in the morning. Then again, the way he was flying all over as she controlled him like some drone didn't help. A tight harness was preferable then. "If we take a taxi, will we make it in time, Karen?" Peter asked, watching the video again as he did his best to get the tie right. "In and out, then in and out I go. If you get your tie done, well, we'll have about 7 minutes to spare considering traffic and the taxi and commute." "Okay, let me try this again. In and out, and through the loop and it's inside out now. 6 minutes and 45 seconds. You're not helping. You almost done in there, Peter," called out May from the other side of the door. "Ooh, just a minute," he said, looking down at his suit. Pants, shoes, belt, and shirt were on and the jacket was on the bed. Where was you when he needed her? Next time he'd ask her in person how to tie a tie, or just have someone else do a bunch so he could have them on call. This was annoying. "You sound a bit frustrated. You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. Just the tie, and once that's on we can go." Peter's fingers were busy trying to get his red tie in order. "And up and over, in and out. And why is it sideways now?" It's almost impressive how much you're failing at this, Karen said. I think you're getting worse. Peter breathed in through his nose. Hello, I hear nose breathing. Someone's mad. The door opened, and in came May with her wide grin as Peter turned. Huh, guess it's the tie, huh? Here, let me help, May said as she walked forward. The girl wearing a dark form-fitting gunmetal gray dress closed in and put her hands on his tie, taking it around her own neck and there, done. She handed the complete tie to him, and Peter looked down dumbly at it, then at her. I was almost expecting you in your school uniform to begin with, and number two, how did you do that? He asked, utterly bamboozled at the sight before him and the action that had taken place. They shrugged nonchalantly. It's not that hard. I gotta do 'em myself, you know. If I can't be a great inventor, how can I not make a simple loop of cloth? May explained. Peter examined the tie around his neck and tightened it up before flattening out his collar. I can see that. You look great, by the way. The pinkette simply shrugged. If I had a choice, I'd rather not wear this, but it's for one night. No biggie, May mused as she walked out, and Peter's eyes followed her departure. Drafty down there though. Yeah, that dress was as form-fitting as Momo's hero costume. He shook his head, pushing away such thoughts before putting his jacket on and grabbing his phone, pulling it from the charger and placing his custom earpiece inside his ear. We good? You have 5 minutes and change if you leave now. Peter rushed into his bathroom, did his hair with some mousse, prepped some cologne, and trotted on out. Ready? MMHMM. May nodded, and Peter noticed she wasn't wearing heels. Didn't bring heels. Those suck. Let's go, May said, walking out the door in her dress and tennis shoes. Peter sighed before smiling and following after her. Hey May. As they walked, May turned around, a big grin on her face as her eyes seemed to zoom in. Thanks. Peter smiled sheepishly, holding up his tie a bit. It's what supporters are for, the pink-haired manic genius exclaimed, marching ahead as Peter followed after her. So, what's the plan again, Karen? Refresh my memory, Peter said as they got to the elevator as it went down. Your plan is to meet up with the Todorokis, Izuku, Momo and Melissa at the gala if at all possible. I cannot seem to obtain their seating arrangements though, what with the unique firewall they have. Firewall? Peter asked as May hummed, inspecting the holopad where the elevator buttons were as her eyes zoomed in and out. He could make out her comments on the circuitry and material. Can you hack it? Never a dull moment with her. Yes, I can hack it. However, how long would you like your itinerary? Karen asked. Let me guess, processing power from my lil old phone, huh? Peter mused, patting his phone in his pocket. Correct. By the time we get there, you would have the RSVP list. Aw Dave, there you are. It was a simple greeting, bog standard even, without any of Toshinori's normal flair that came with his All Might form. Even if he was hulked out and the two stood by the railing looming over the first floor. Still, David turned a little too fast. Though, that could have just been the gala. Tonight was a big night for him and his daughter. The head scientist and founder of I-Island gave Toshinori a tiny little wave before leaning over the edge of a railing. Toshinori took a spot next to him, and spied a certain blonde-haired girl trying to teach the successor of One for All how to dance to a tiny tune on the dance floor below. I think that you're taking eagle-eye parenting to a new level, Toshinori joked. David cracked a smile at that. Hey, I haven't got every camera on I-Island trained on her at all times. I applaud your restraint, Toshinori commented, getting as comfortable as he could on the railing in his suit. It felt constraining around the neck, though that was for every suit that wasn't his All Might attire. I didn't know that you had a suit in that size, David said. Toshinori shrugged. Got it via rush order or night I did. And I have my hero costume on underneath. Gotta make the big show at the party and all that. He always did have a knack for getting what you needed before you knew it, David said. Although, this is one of the few things that I wish he didn't need to get you. It's not so bad, Toshinori shrugged. Rather refreshing actually. First time in years that I haven't been the center of attention. You really should be, David muttered, almost solemnly. Toshinori gave his old friend a quick clap on the back with his big paw. Thanks, but I'm fine with stepping out. Have you seen the crop of students that's following me? David shrugged. They're not half bad, especially that kid of yours you brought too. Toshinori smiled at that. No matter how many times he heard it, the acknowledgement of young Midoriya's potential always seemed to fill him with pride. Although, he couldn't tell him everything. The true secret of One for All had to be kept secret. The fewer who knew, the fewer targets the enemy had. However, he could go without stepping on my daughter's feet, David joked. Down below, they could hear Midoriya bowing profusely while apologizing for his clumsy dance moves, while Melissa took it all in stride as she laughed and encouraged him. Worried that he'll be a better dancer by the time that we get down there. Toshinori asked comfortably. David rolled his eyes. I don't remember you ever being any good at it either. All Might let slip his trademark grin. But he noticed something. The moment that he mentioned the party, David tensed. It was slight, and he wouldn't have noticed it if the chestnut-haired man had changed since their days back in the States. But it was definitely there. Was he that nervous about the party? No, he'd thrown around a dozen parties like this. David had to as the founder of Island. Toshinori was sure of that. Not to mention hiring organizers. So what made this different? It couldn't be because of him. He and David had done too much to care about seeming cool, or even professional in front of one another. So why? Well, I only handled some of it, David said. Melissa could honestly tell you more than I could. She talks more to the organizers lately, trying to teach her and whatnot. Really? Toshinori asked, feeling a little better. Well, that's good for her. We can ask her, if you want, David offered with an apologetic smile. Sure, Toshinori said, his eyebrows slowly notching upwards. But David was already moving before Toshinori even started leaning off the railing. He had to hurry for a moment to catch up to his old sidekick, who walked far faster than he really should. At this point, Toshinori could practically smell that something was wrong. For it to affect David this bad, it was probably something personal. Though, he shouldn't bring it up here, not yet at least, not so close to Melissa. First chance he got, he'd get to the bottom of this. For now, he had to keep a straight face when young Midoriya tried to do the starting few steps to a solo dance. A rather interesting attempt that really made Toshinori wonder if he ever did any leg training. People gave them a wide berth, all whispering as All Might walked by, smiling and waving as he approached. I think you're supposed to hit the floor, not your shoes, All Might commented. Heck, young Midoriya went ramrod straight, flush with embarrassment. All the while, Melissa and David did their best not to laugh. I was just trying to put Melissa's teachings to use. Midoriya blurted out in English. The right word you're looking for is into practice. Melissa corrected him before looking up at All Might. Enjoying the lead up to the party, Uncle Might. I've been keeping off to the side thankfully, Toshinori said with a wave as he looked down at the two. So I haven't been swamped, but give it some time. The people at this party are quite restrained, hee. All Might mused as he looked around, seeing people looking at him and gossiping amongst themselves. But whenever his eyes settled on one they would smile and wave. When I learned you were coming yesterday, I had to make a memo not to overwhelm you, David said from the side, glancing down at his watch before looking back. Again, he was looking nervous. Something wrong, Dave? Eat anything bad? The man flinched noticeably. Oh no, and not at all. Just a little tired. Once I get an espresso in me, I'll be as right as rain. David smiled, closing his eyes and waving it off. Okay, I'll go make final preparations. All Might, if you'd like to join me, David said, turning as he gestured with his head. Right away, old buddy, All Might said with a waving salute. He turned around and placed his big hands on Izuku's shoulders. Oh, and young Midoriya. He spoke in Japanese as he leaned down to whisper in his ear. Melissa tilted her head. Plus ultra, he said in a whisper, and Izuku tilted his head. At dancing, All Might posed with a fist to the sky before turning around. He saw David walking on ahead, and looking at his watch yet again. Yes, this had gone far enough. He walked over to his friend, and his mere presence made David flinch. David, All Might said, his voice low, yet fully serious, what's wrong? His old psychic practically broke out into a nervous sweat at the words. He looked around, as if considering his options. All Might, I set something up for tonight, David fully admitted. All Might crossed his arms. He didn't answer, he wasn't the one that was supposed to talk here. Hey All Might. Both David and All Might snapped to the side, watching as a happy Fayumi Todoroki and a seemingly drained Shoto walked up, her eyes darting between the two. Are we interrupting something important? She asked. We were hoping to talk to Mr. Shield, if we could. David and All Might shared a look. It was enough for David to take another quick glance at his watch. And no, it's no problem, just a tight schedule. I've got a few minutes, he said. We won't take long, Fayumi said. I was just hoping, Mr. Shield, if you could give a quick tip or two to Shoto here. The dual-haired boy shot a frankly betrayed look at his sister. A glare that could have frozen an army or burned a country down bounced off of the sister like a fly off a tiger tank. He's trying to talk to everyone here. You wouldn't happen to know how to start a decent pitch, would you? Fayumi, Shoto said, I'm more than capable of talking to people. The last three executives would beg to differ. Shoto pursed his lips, but had no words. David offered a nervous laugh, one that All Might would have joined if the situation were any different. Fayumi noticed the forceful nature of the sound, but a ring stopped any comment that might have formed. Oh, excuse me, Fayumi said sheepishly as she reached into her purse, pulling out her phone, and Shoto noticed her wince. Hey dad. She spoke in Japanese under her breath. Sorry, I can't hear you. She got up and walked out of the busy reception room. The old man was here. Shoto took a deep breath, bowing politely before following her. Please excuse us. Important family call, he said as he trotted after his sister, a scowl on his face. A family call. David spoke to himself, then his eyes widened. Wait, All Might was the only top 10 pro coming here. Those were Angie Todoroki's children. Did that mean? Huh? Izu looks a little worried, Melissa said by his side. Hey dad, I'm gonna use the restroom one last time. Right before our big announcement, David asked, cocking an eyebrow. Bob is gonna be the one doing all the hyping up before All Might is called up, right? Melissa winked. I'll make my way around the back, it'll be fine, she said before she trotted away, and David saw her go. On some level, he was a little relieved to see her out of the room. She wouldn't have to see firsthand what was coming next. On the other, the worry she would have. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath and a sip from his cognac. It was for the greater good now. Quite the line, ain't it? Shiki said pleasantly. He had the same calm smile on his face, while Maya had her typical neutral expression, eyes looking over the area as they got inside the tower on the first floor. To the side they noticed a map of the iExpo opening night gala. The first floor was for mingling, checking in, and ordering some drinks. The second was the reception hall where the opening talks would take place, along with a big dining room as Momo looked up, seeing the interior of iTower's front lobby, with the escalators going up to the second floor. She could just make out the massive spire that was the elevator far in the distance at the spine of the building, just past the windows outside the tower. Nothing major, of course, Mayer replied as she led the way. Face as hard as stone compared to the smile on her husband's face. Momo fingered the fabric of her lime green dress. They approached the reception desk right beside the escalators leading up to the second floor. Reservation, the woman said, sitting by someone with a turtle shell on their back. Yaoyorozu, table for 3. Mayer replied in crisp English. Ah, there you are. Hope you enjoy tonight's gala, she said, the tortoise shell man giving the trio paper bracelets to check themselves in with. Momo looked around. Everyone from last night said they were coming, so. Eyes forward, Momo. Maya cut in, and Momo turned, seeing the auburn-haired woman looking back at her. I was looking for my friends. Your friends? From yesterday, Maya mused. Why yes, they were going to attend the gala. Weren't they your classmates from school? Shiki mused. Todoroki is here with his sister on their own accord, and Peter is here because he won the festival. Todoroki, that's Endeavor's boy, isn't it? And Peter was the one who helped host that study group. Yes, Shiki said. So he was. Maya turned forward. He seemed to take your cooking the best, dear. Shiki laughed, and Momo felt the temperature drop by several degrees as she had chills, seeing Maya glare at her husband. Yaoyorozu Maya was an amazing businesswoman and a former military contractor, but a cook was not something she could call a talent. You're cute when you're angry like that. Shiki patted his wife's cheek. Maya let out a frustrated sigh. Mother, I've been meaning to ask. Why did you cook that day? She asked, and now she felt the brunt of her mother's stare. Later. Come, let's get our. Yaoyorozu, said a voice, and the trio turned as they were about to climb the escalator. A man in a sharp violet suit, wavy brown hair and soft ruby eyes approached with a playful grin. It's so nice to see you here. Ah, Yagami, Maya droned. I see you're here too. She turned towards Momo. You go get us our table, all right. Your father and I must talk a little. I can handle things. Yagami-san is a friend, Shiki said, putting his hand on his wife's shoulder. You should hurry to the complimentary salad bar and load up. He gave his wife a playful elbow. I ate enough spinach today for breakfast, Maya replied. Yet you were going over the menu they had at the buffet quite intently. Shiki winked, and Maya looked flushed. I actually wouldn't mind. Yagami said, hands up. It'll only be for a quick catch-up and clarification is all. I'll fill you in when I get back, the long dark-haired man said as Maya sighed and walked towards Momo. If you insist. Let's go, Momo. Right, mother? She saw Yagami give a wave and pat Shiki on the back. Momo nodded. How is Yatsubashi-san doing, by the way? Shiki said as Momo began to ascend the escalator. Fine indeed. Detnerat is going well with us expanding. And she lost them as she got to the top, standing silently with her mother. Here usually and on those dealings. Don't you usually do the talking? Momo asked. Your father may know the Tao like the back of his hand, but he wants to learn on discussing business matters. Besides, Yagami Haruto is just a rep sent from Detnerat to inspect the expo and talk. He's not the true brains, just a puppet, Maya said as they got to the top and began to walk towards their assigned reception hall. There were 3 in total. Multiple halls, It's a big party. Only makes sense they can't fit everyone in one room. Besides, our room has the lentils and cashews in their salad bar. After the opening speeches from S.H.I.E.L.D. and All Might, we can mingle freely. Hello? Fayumi asked. Fayumi, Inji said, a tired and gruff echo coming through the phone line. Are you and Shoto at the gala? Movement in the corner of her eye prompted Fayumi to look back. Her brother, Izuku, and even Melissa were approaching. Why yes, we were just talking to David S.H.I.E.L.D. Good, he's a good man to know, Inji said, and it seemed as if he was leaning away from the phone. For a few moments, he didn't say anything. Father, she asked. Sorry, I was just thinking a few things over, he said. Are the two of you having a good time? Fayumi blinked. Why yeah, it's a fun party. Why? No reason, Inji said, but just. His voice trailed off for a few seconds. Make sure that he's not so stiff when talking to everyone, Inji finally said. No one respects a person that isn't willing to show some humility when they're starting out. Okay, Fayumi replied. I'll be sure to tell him. Can I talk to him? Fayumi looked up, and Shoto took a deep breath through his nose, eyes narrowed. He's not at the table at the moment. Looking at the pasta salad, she let out a forced laugh. You know, replacement to soba. All right, thank you. I'll be down at the gala in half an hour. Just landed, have a good night. With that said, the line died. Fayumi pulled her phone away from her ear, staring at it like it was a bomb ready to go off. Something wrong? Shoto asked. I don't think so, Fayumi answered. Should that be a question? Melissa asked, a sentiment that Izuku seemed to mirror. Probably not, Fayumi admitted. But it's just, I guess I haven't heard him sound like that before. Who? Izuku asked. Our father, Shoto answered coldly. Is that a bad thing? The tech heiress said. Or am I out of the loop on something? Well, Izuku said, it's complicated. Understatement of the century. It doesn't concern you. You're fine, Shield-san, Shoto muttered, and Fayumi paled. Shoto, it's the truth. Okay, family matter. Sorry. Melissa raised her hands in surrender. Maybe we should go back to the party. Izuku spoke up, stepping in. Shoto sighed. I apologize for my rudeness, Shield-san. I acted out of turn. He bowed lightly. Forgive me. You're fine, Todoroki. It's some family stuff and you're high-strung over it. She shrugged. It's as you say, ain't my place. Shoto closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. All right, we should. I swear to God this thing is going to be the death of me. Everyone in the hall paused for a moment, turning as one down the hall to where their friends had walked through. Hatsum looked as happy as she could be, while Parker seemed to be arguing with his phone. For the last time I did the not correct "oh sup guys," the American said, casually pocketing his phone in his suit jacket. Parker, Shoto said with a quirked eyebrow, are you just arriving? Would you believe that I got stuck fighting a necktie? Shoto opened his mouth, only to close it, because it was not worth getting into. But we're here now, Parker declared. We didn't miss the big show, did we? You mean that big show? Hatsum exclaimed, pointing up at the screen as Parker turned, everyone else's eyes following. It was All Might talking. He was in his hero costume, on a stage in one of the reception rooms holding some champagne. Thank you for inviting me, everyone. I'm not usually one for speeches, but... Suddenly the lights ahead began to flicker. Peter looked up. A loud blaring noise began to sound out from within the lobby as steel walls behind them began to rise up. Many of the people were caught off guard, yelping in shock. The windows, someone said, and Peter saw steel coming down where it met the rising steel from the ground. The entire lobby was now blocked off with metal. What the hell is going on? Is this some prank? Mommy, it's too loud. Karen, Peter whispered as he and May walked closer and closer towards rest of the group near the restrooms. I'm trying to get a clue. Peter, the firewall won't let me in, but this looks like a hack or a cyber attack. A cyber attack? Peter asked. What's going on? May asked, her smile still present, but Peter could see that her eyes looked a little worried. Shield-san, what's happening? Fayumi asked. The security system is activating. But why now? She asked, perplexed. Peter ignored her, hand to his ear to block out the other voices in a bid to hear Karen's updates. Can you probe it? See what's up from outside the firewall? Give me a moment. This is the Island security system with an important announcement, said a female automated voice as Peter and the rest of the residents in the lobby looked up. We have received a report of a bomb within the Expo Convention Center. As such, Island is undergoing a code red lockdown. That didn't sound good. All residents and tourists should return to their homes and lodgings immediately. Those who are too far away should relocate to the nearest bomb shelter. A bomb. More voices yelled out from below. We can't go anywhere. Let us out. Peter, they asked, and Peter looked around. Peter-san, are you talking to someone? Izuku asked, and the American boy felt the group's eyes on him. Yeah, talking to his adopted baby, May exclaimed proudly. What? Melissa asked. It's her word for gadget. Parker, you were muttering under your breath. Shoto asked. Is something going on here? I tried to call Dad. Service is dead. Fayumi raised her phone. All the reception bars dead. Peter was quiet, lips tight as everyone looked up at the sound of the alarms. Anyone who is outside 10 minutes from now will be considered a villain and arrested immediately. Please refrain from going outdoors. Priority 1 buildings will be safeguarded by the system. The automatic voice said as more and more people became anxious and worried. I repeat most. Spider sense. Hide. Peter grabbed May and dived to the door leading to the boys' restroom. And right on time too as gunfire erupted along with screaming from the civilians. Everyone rushed in before he closed the door and quietly opened it a crack. Overlooking the first floor lobby were men in masks. And they had guns. More of them marched down the hallway they were in prior, thankfully not spotting them. Okay, we're in trouble, Peter muttered. Peter, look, May whispered, resting her chin on his shoulder, and he felt her chest against his back. Peter desperately focused his attention on more important matters. What's going on, Uncle Mite? Melissa muttered, fear-laced in her voice. They had a line of sight on the main TV screen that overlooked the first 2 floors, the camera now pointing at a group of men entering the room where All Might was. Peter let his hands relax. If All Might got here, All Might should handle this. The Izuku was cut off. All of a sudden, blue whips lashed out from the stage, wrapping around the limbs of the symbol of peace and forcing him to his knees, much to the shock and horror of the crowd as they screamed out in shock. We're not, Peter finished, everyone behind him gasping in horror. The armored men took position overlooking the first floor by the railings. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Wolfram exclaimed as he and several of his men walked on in, his eyes set on the now restrained symbol of peace. As you can see, your security system is undergoing a little maintenance. Particularly, it's under our control. He could hear the grunts and cries of defiance from the other heroes, and the shocked and frightened look of the various fat cat sheep within the room. He set his eyes on S.H.I.E.L.D. with a smirk. Now, I see a lot of you heroes in attendance, he said as he put his eyes on All Might before he brought his fingers together as if for a flick. Wolfram snapped his fingers, and the camera feed changed to a display outside the tower. Some of the drones had various civilians cornered, as planned. And not just outside the tower, as the images began to circulate all throughout Island. And if you try anything funny, the cases of police brutality will go from 0 to, I dunno, a couple thousand in a hurry. He couldn't help but grin like the devil. So if I were you lot, I'd just take a little nap on the ground. Because as of right now, he held his arms out wide. Every single person on this island is our hostage. You fiend. Bastard. Wolfram couldn't but chuckle at the little curses being thrown his way by the so-called heroes. Talk was cheap after all. Gotta have the bite to back it up. He saw the pain on All Might's face as his hands, currently bound due to the light tether whips, relaxed. So much for trying to do a full-force power flick of sorts. He turned towards All Might, who was glaring at him hard. Release them all, he growled as Wolfram kept on walking up to the stage. Oh, I have something planned for you, Mr. All Smiles, he said as he climbed up on the stage before kicking at All Might's leg hard enough to make him fall. The light tethers only tightened their grip, the blonde Hulk wincing as he tried to resist. You so much as move off this stage, you try one little act of heroism, my men will kill everyone here. The military will be here soon, asshole, said a voice, and Wolfram turned, seeing a portly man step up. He was sweating and nervous, but clearly trying to put on a brave face. How cute. If Island has any major catastrophes, the US military is not coming. We have the entire island under our control, fool. Nothing is coming in or out in terms of a signal. The red-haired man in the iron mask grinned as he saw the rich guy's face collapse in despair. So don't bother trying to call anyone. He made a gesture with his head, his men dragging the fat fool up to him. All Might, he growled, to show you that we mean business. He aimed his handgun at the man's face. No, and fired, causing screams and shrieks to go off as the man fell off the stage, but with no bullet wound at all. The bullet hole was actually in the adjacent wall. He staggered, backing away in pure terror as David Shield knelt by his side, sharing his look of fear. Ah yes, Samuel Arnold and David Shield, prominent researchers of the Shield Foundation and its founder, and his clients. Wolfram couldn't help but display his sharp grin. Oh, the look on their faces. This is your first and last warning. I told you that already, but around the room, his men readied their weapons as everyone yelped in surprise. Now you have a refresher and know we're serious. Next time, my men won't miss. What do you want? Said a well-dressed woman. I have money. We have that. Wolfram raised his hand and discharged his gun into the ceiling. Shut up. We aren't here for your money and jewels. He turned, leering down at S.H.I.E.L.D. Mr. Shield, if you would be so kind. Wolfram oiled. Dave, no, don't. Who gave you permission to speak? Wolfram barked, his steel-toed boot smashing against All Might's side. The man let out a pained grimace. World's strongest man, brought down this low. Too easy. Please. David got up, hands clenched at his sides. Just don't hurt anyone here. I'll listen to your demands. The auburn-haired man said as Wolfram smirked. Good. Now, we will release you all unharmed once we have what we need and are on our merry way. Wolfram assured the hostages as he walked through the room, his men holding shield as he tapped his earpiece. And life will go on peaky keen, so just take a load off and relax. Status, always help to get an update. Security's going smoothly. We have the entire island on lockdown. Swordkill spoke in his ear, Wolfram nodding. Anyone outside causing trouble? None. Drones are keeping them under control and escorting them to the centers like good sheep. The red-haired man smirked. Good. Joker, we have the servers under lock and key. We have the maintenance guys restrained. Kane spoke. I'm going through my prospects now and my daughter. Where's my set of voice as his men turned while raising their guns, seeing a well-dressed man run up into the reception room. The man, an unassuming Caucasian with brown hair, stopped, his face pale. Came from the emergency stairs, said Nix, going by his voice. Wolfram narrowed his eyes. On your knees. Wolfram raised his gun, and the man raised his hands, looking terrified as he did so. Don't hurt him. He's done nothing wrong. David pleaded. It's clear he didn't heed my message, but since you asked nicely. He turned and gestured to his men. The two gunmen to his side kicked the man down. Search him, then throw him into the room. If he tries anything. He turned, glaring. Kill him first. Understood. Two mercs searched the man in the suit, grabbing his phone and wallet before tossing them aside. Wolfram bent down to look at the wallet's ID. Richard O'Neill from Jersey City. Wolfram tossed it aside as the men threw him against the table in the room, causing food and punch to spray out everywhere. Now, if all goes well, this will take no longer than a half hour out of your night, Wolfram declared to the room. So sit tight, don't bite, and you all live. Don't, you die. Simple as that. He leered. He jabbed his handgun into David Shield's back. Elevators, my boy. He smirked, and Shield nodded, glaring at him before complying. Arnold did the same as he and two of his men walked out of the room. Okay, we cannot stay here in this bathroom. Peter spoke as he did his utmost to get a bead on the area through the crack in the door. The armed men were overlooking the railing at regular intervals and had posts established closer to the reception hall. Where can we go though? From the look and sounds of things, villains have taken over the tower. Fayumi whispered, the group as a whole keeping a low profile in the restroom. Melissa was biting on her thumb, pacing while Izuku washed his face. Shoto leaned against the wall, arms crossed and brow creased in thought while Mei stood close by with a smile on her face. The first basement, Melissa spoke. If we can get to the emergency stairs, we should be able to get down there no problem. Assuming that place isn't being watched by guards. Shoto spoke in English. We don't know how many villains there are, but the fact that they were able to restrain All Might and all the pros in the gala using that security system is a big tell. Yeah, someone's in the security sector here in the tower. And worst of all, they're using it on the entire island. Melissa mused, arms crossed as her brow was furrowed in thought. And if our phone service and internet are down, then that means they have access to the server room in the 5th basement floor. So this entire thing is a coordinated operation. Peter muttered, keeping an eye on the door crack. He saw some guards move away from the rail. Melissa, where's the stairwell? He asked. Outside, to the left, second door. Melissa whispered, having taken May's spot. Peter craned his head as best as he could, and found it. Okay, he turned back, seeing everyone at the ready. Let's go. He opened it, and walked silently but quickly towards it. He glanced back, seeing everyone else following his lead with Izuku bringing up the rear. He got to the door, opening it and gesturing everyone inside. Izuku finally came through and he closed the door. Everyone began running down the stairs, their footfalls loud and heavy in the stairwell which made Peter flinch. Soon they got to the basement, far enough away from any potential gunmen that Peter sighed in relief. Okay, he spoke first, looking at Izuku. What's our plan here? All Might. Shoto spoke up first. If there's anyone who can handle things, it's him. Except he's bound, and there's lots of villains in that room with guns trained on everyone. Melissa replied, cupping her chin. I hope Dad's okay. But how and why are villains here? Well, if they have the most secure place in the world under their control, could it be, like, an inside job? Fayumi suggested. Izuku crossed his arms, brow furrowed in thought. It's possible. What do villains have to gain from being here? There's only research on quirks and techno. He snapped his head up, answering his own question. Answered it on your own. Peter said. So, villains have locked up the tower, so they don't want anyone getting in or out. They have control of security. And the servers as well, considering that we can't get a signal out to the satellites or any internet connection. He began to pace, taking note of everyone here. Midori, what's our sitch? Sitch? I don't get it. What does that? It's slang for situation, Izuku. Melissa answered for him, offering a small smile. Well, me, Peter, and Todoroki can fight with our quirks. Hatsum-san, you don't happen to have any, gear on your person, do you? He asked, and the smiling girl shook her head. Nope. But this does give me the idea for a baby to make now that you mention it, Midoriya. She pulled a small notepad out of her cleavage and a pen. Why do you have those in there? Peter uttered in bewilderment. Cause I can. I have room. May chirped as she began writing. Peter sighed, hand to his forehead. I know how to use my fire, but it's not as strong as Shoto's. Best I can do is melt locks or set things on fire, Fayumi said shamefully, her fingers emitting little jets of flame. And I'm quirkless, sorry everyone, Melissa said, her shoulders slumping. Don't be, in fact you're probably the most important person here. Izuku spoke out. I mean, you know this tower like the back of your hand. Midori's right. Peter stepped up. In any case, how can we get to the security and server rooms? Well, the server room is 4 floors below us, but the security room is even trickier. It's on floor 200, just several floors below Dad's office and the vault. Melissa's eyes widened. That has to be where they're going. The villains anyway. We're gonna have to cut them off then. Shoto spoke up. Can we access the elevators? We'll have to try, Izuku said. But we do need to get help from the outside and... Peter, Karen spoke in his ear. Put me on speaker. You have a plan? He asked aloud, and everyone's eyes were on him. We're talking about one right now and... Izuku was cut off as Shoto stepped forward. You have an earpiece, and you're talking to someone despite the signal and service being jammed. Parker, he said with narrowed eyes. Who is that? Peter stood, biting his lip before he took a big breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The symbol of the Avengers appeared before a flat line was shown, everyone's eyes on it. Hello everyone, I am Karen. Silence reigned in the group. Who? Shoto asked. Wait, Karen. Peter, is that? Izuku asked, eyes wide as Peter rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, she's my personal digital assistant thing. Artificial intelligence, but I am more of a personal cyber assistant, Karen cheekily said. From the sound of things, it seems like this entire mechanized island is under lockdown due to outside forces having infiltrated from the inside. Wait, Peter, you have an AI? Melissa asked. Top bottom or bottom up? She asked, looking at the phone as she approached. She's a bottom up. May elaborated with a big grin, and Melissa's jaw dropped. How did you? She asked, eyes now alight with interest and awe. Look, I'll explain later, okay? Peter said. Karen, you said you had a plan. All eyes were on the phone. So, Peter has an AI like those robots in his phone? Fayumi asked. Sounds like it, Shoto affirmed. If I can have the attention of the class. Karen spoke. As I said, it seems that we will need to counter our opponents with their own medicine. If I can get direct access into the server, then we use that saying you humans like so much. Fight fire with fire, right? Now stay down, if you know what's good for you lot, said the leader of the men that had the entire reception room under guard. It was smaller than the main room where All Might and the other main heroes were. But Momo and Maya were sitting down, men patrolling with rifles in hand. Momo had her hand concealed under the table, and her phone was poking out. No service even as she moved it back and forth. Everything's being jammed, mother, she whispered. I can tell. All Might and over a dozen heroes are here. They're in no position to intervene. Maya replied back lightly. Momo could see that her eyes were scanning over the room like a hawk. Momo looked back at the TV screen behind her, wincing at the sight of All Might on the floor of the stage bound by those light tethers. The symbol of peace brought down like this, all thanks to the videos of those drones pinning the civilians down. She bit her lip. With so many men in the room, she couldn't afford to do anything, lest she or the other civilians get gunned down. She didn't notice any of the armed villains having any noteworthy quirks. 7 men, 2 at the door, 2 to the right and left, 1 behind. Maya uttered lightly under her breath as Momo turned. Momo, her eye was on her. You need to listen to what I have to say. Mother, quiet, she whispered sharply. I need you to make a smoke machine. Create one under the table. Her eyes were on the men patrolling around the tables. And have a flashbang ready too. Momo widened her eyes. She turned, glaring at her. Listen to me, I'm going to get us out of here. There's several light tether ports in this room. But they only target those ID on the security system as threats, so we'll have to be fast. She hissed, turning away and focusing on the men walking away. Momo frowned and shoved her hand under the table. What are you going to do? She asked, her hand getting to work as she winced. She much preferred creating bulkier items from her back or stomach. An item like a smoking machine would take time, maybe a minute or so. Trust me, Maya replied. That training under Yoroi Musha was paying. Hey you. She froze as she turned, seeing a man standing there with an assault rifle. Take your hand out from under the table. Momo felt cold, and Maya turned. My daughter has had a long day, forgive. Shut up, chink bitch. He backhanded her, and Maya was knocked to the floor without so much as a grunt. Mother, Momo yelled, canceling the smoke machine halfway as she rushed to her parents' side. She felt her hair get tugged and yelled, the man pulling her away. You're up to something, aren't you? The man growled, gun trained on Maya as a muscular arm went around Momo's neck, the girl gasping. Maya turned, and Momo saw something in her mother's eyes. Let her go. Now, the auburn-haired woman growled, keeling over and finger-tapping the floor. Piss off, you should have obeyed first thing. He said, gun trained on her. For all we know, your daughter probably has some quirk. Hey Anwusu, check under that table. One of the masked men nodded as he walked over. Try something. He hissed in her ear. ... and your mom's a fucking corpse. Momo saw one of the bulkier men approach. The other civilians hustled up in concern and worry as she had her eyes on her mother, who was finger-tapping the floor as she glared right at Momo. The motions. Morse code. Momo's brain went to work, deciphering it as she saw Enwusu approach. FLASHBOMB. Momo understood, struggling lightly, grunting as the man brought his elbow up to her neck as the men approached. Her quirk was at work. First earplugs in the ears. Then she felt something bulge on her thigh, her dress hiding it. Enwusu had almost reached them. Maya placed her hands on her ears and Momo saw her right hand beginning to glow like the rainbow. Hey, he raised his gun. Now or never. At that moment, the pinless flashbang dropped out before Momo kicked it in front of her. She closed her eyes and bit down hard on the man's arm. Bang! Yells of surprise from the other hostages and one of pain from the man erupted as Momo conjured a quick shiv and stabbed the man in the side as she was dropped, falling to the floor with her back bulging. A massive metal plate shield was conjured behind her, tearing open her expensive dress as her hands were behind her head. She could hear muffled gunfire in the distance and she looked up, trying to regain her bearings. It felt like forever, but she could hear the rattling of gunfire before it abruptly stopped after several well-placed muffled shots. She did her best to breathe, in and out before she felt the shield taken off of her and looked up, seeing her mother pulling her up. Well done, she said, and Momo looked down at her spare hand. It had morphed into a customized silenced machine pistol. She looked around, seeing each of the masked and armed men dead. Several of the ports where the light tether whips were stationed had also been destroyed via gunshots. Any bullets capable of that would have had to be armor-piercing. Suddenly the muffled gunshots being able to eliminate the mercenaries who had been wearing body armor made a lot more sense. Her mother had killed them. There was groaning all around them as the other hostages recovered, not having been warned about the flashbang. Momo confirmed that the enemy were all dead with a quick glance. She shot them dead. Naya dashed over to the nearest table and grabbed a salad bowl, scarfing down on a handful of spinach. She turned towards the people who were still gaining their bearings. On your feet. We have to barricade the doors, she barked, running to the main door and locking it via the nearby console. Momo, come, she yelled. You killed them, Momo uttered in shock. In some ways, she had expected this, but she never would have expected to see her mother's quirk used as it was when she was still a contractor, like this. Momo, Maya barked, and Momo was brought back to reality, running over to her. Maya's transformed hand was aimed at the console, and she began ripping out some wires with her other hand, then fired repeatedly into it. The door was now shut quite firmly, Momo estimating that only welding equipment could open it now. That should do it. For now, Maya breathed. They have access to the security systems. She ran over to the other door, eyeing it and going to the control panel. She could hear yelling down the hall, and fired at the console again, frying it as the doors shut down. Now we can't get out, said a civilian from behind them, a well-dressed black man approaching. What are we supposed to do now? Yeah, we should have waited for the heroes, added his fair-skinned companion, a lady with a pompous hairstyle as Maya turned, glaring at them. Go out and ask them to take you hostage again then. I'm sure if you're nice enough they'll shoot you last. No one moved or said anything. She growled before she turned towards Momo, who was in her sports bra, a tattered dress, and her dress shoes. Momo, I need you to prime up some gear. Momo wasn't listening, staring at the dead men bleeding across the floor. Focus, young lady, Maya shouted, cupping Momo's chin and bringing it close, glaring right into her eyes. You're in danger, and there isn't a law on this earth that will stop me from doing exactly what I need to do right now. All Might is in the next room, as is the rest of the heroes on this island, so focus. Now, she let Momo go before she turned towards the center of the room. The black-haired girl didn't move. She remembered those scars on her mother's back. Did you do this all the time? Back before you met Momo, Maya growled, looking back, her eyes hard and hot. For the last time I said to focus. When the time comes, we will discuss it. For now, make some gear. Anything. Let's see. She looked around, and looked up to see the 3rd or 4th floor balcony beyond the glass. She raised her gun hand up and fired several shots. The glass shattered as Maya stood back, people yelping in surprise. Momo, make a grappling gun and a pair of walkies. I'll need you to make some trip mines as well. Then, All Might perked up. He heard a loud bang and gunfire, which sounded like it was from a room barely 20 yards away. He writhed in his bindings, feeling completely helpless. He looked up, seeing the clock. He'd made sure to use his form sparingly today. He was over the 2-hour mark though, less than an hour before he ran out. Got to hold on. Young Midoriya, Dave, Melissa, stay safe. What do you mean we've lost men down there? Wolfram barked as he and his team waited for the elevator to come down. He growled as David looked to his side, Samuel standing stoically but shell-shocked. To think they had agreed to this. We had all the heroes in one room, Wolfram said over his earpiece. They took out the comms. Fucking hell, Shield. The one room where you didn't install your little prime security system, and this shit happens. We did, David replied. Someone took them out faster than the system could respond. I didn't ask for your commentary. The red-haired man growled, wagging his finger at him. And where's that damn elevator? He put his hand to his earpiece. Swordkill, Joker, status. Camera in ballroom 3 is out. Flashbang probably did it, or that bitch with the gun hand quirk. Gun hand quirk, Wolfram uttered. Can you open it up? We could, but the system down there is destroyed because they shot the panels. Trying to back channel now, but it'll take several minutes. Wolfram sighed. Keep an eye on it. Bigger pay all around. Silver lining to all this, he uttered, and David narrowed his eyes. That was all he cared about upon losing his men. A bigger cut of his pay. For what it's worth, and sorry for what hap. What did I say? Wolfram harshly elbowed David to the ground. Hey, Samuel yelled, but he got a butt of an assault rifle to the back for his trouble. We hired you, David bit out as Wolfram walked over. He placed his boot on the auburn-haired man's chest and pressed down, making him cough. You did, but someone else hired us in turn. Wolfram smirked darkly, and David's eyes widened. What? We aren't some fancy acting stunt troupe. We're the real deal among the mercenary groups. On top of that, we have quite the client too. Paid not just quadruple what you are offering, but bonuses and all that fancy gear at the top of this tower. Wolfram leered, his yellow eyes shining like the devil himself. David felt his heart sink. Elevator is almost here, look, said one of the mercs as Wolfram looked up, seeing the pod coming down. There we are. Now up on your feet, he said, aiming his pistol at him as David was pulled up and shoved inside, the more elderly Samuel following suit. These men were real villains. He'd just wanted to get that device out. Oh, what would Melinda think of him now, watching him from heaven above? They got inside before Wolfram tapped on the topmost button, but there was no reaction. Huh, guess it's fingerprint locked. Shield, Wolfram ordered. Top floor, your office in the vault. If you please, he said with a devilish smirk as David glared back at him. He hated this monster, but he hated himself even more for concocting this stupid ruse. So he pressed the top button, as the holographic panel recognized that it was him. His hand scanned across the top 24 floors in an instant. He promptly took a pistol butt to the head, slamming him against the glass pane, and David saw stars. He heard Samuel cry out his name. Trying to die a hero, a shield. Wolfram hissed. Guess you'll be joining your wifey then. You won't get in. David yelled. Kill me, you'll never get inside. Oh really? Wolfram cocked back his pistol. Why? Quad lock at the true vault. David breathed, hand cradling his temple where the pistol struck. Voice recognition, eye scan, and fingerprint, all while putting down a special password. He glared, and Wolfram's eyes widened, hand going to his earpiece. Swordkill, can you get into the vault? Trying, sir. Fuck, not even the virus he made can help us get in. Wolfram's eyes were back on David, alight with fury. The plan was for me to give you the controls and the virus to put Island on lockdown, under your control. David smirked. About 99.9% of it, that is. The trenchcoat-wearing villain grabbed David by the scruff of his shirt and slammed him against the glass. You're lucky I need you alive, he hissed, getting up in his face. You need me for the vault. I won't open it for you then. Even if we get up there, you're stuck, Wolfram growled, before his bared teeth expression turned upside down into a smirk. All right, if dying or those hostages won't motivate you then. He brought up his hand to his earpiece, dropping David as the man slumped down. Samuel bent down, checking on him. Eyes on the girl. He spoke, going through the cameras. Haven't seen her since she left the ballroom. She ain't inside any of them, or down in the first floor lobby. David's blood went cold. No, leave her alone. Wolfram looked back down and leered at him. Bring her to me. I want all cameras to search for her in. Oh bingo, said a female voice that made Wolfram wince. Pipe down, Joker, and not so loud. You're looking for Melissa Shield, yeah, said this Joker. One of my prospects is with her now. Where? Wolfram grinned darkly. First basement, bunch of brats. I'll send some men down there, they'll flush them out to you if able. Sounds like a plan, big dog. Joker replied back. Me and the gang will prepare. Joker out. Leave her alone. Melissa Shield will live, along with all the hostages I have on this island, as per my word. Wolfram spoke, gun trained on David's face. As long as you agree to open the vault. David remained silent. Angie looked down at his phone, seeing that the call had been cut off as he was waiting for a taxi after retrieving his luggage from the baggage claim. Then the red glow of the lockdown from the security system began flashing as he saw more of those security drones roaming near people. The fact that his phone's signal had been cut off, combined with how these robots were acting. The following announcement from the public address system brought his thoughts to a screeching halt. A bomb in A Island, one of the most heavily guarded places in the entire world. Hey, we have to get to a hotel, said one of the nearby civilians as NG turned, seeing them move past the security drones, only for the drones to open fire with their standard loadout of rubber bullets. Screams sounded out. Hostile activity detected. Preventative countermeasures engaged. The drones lifted the top plate on their heads and began to fire. Some kind of foam followed by another round of gunfire. Flashfire fist. Heat erupted just under his skin. Honed from decades of training, focusing it into the frontal point of his finger. Hell Spider. NG swiped his finger in a hard line. Superheated fire arcing through the air, slicing through metal and vegetation like a sword through butter. The security drones fell to the ground, little more than sparking slag. The people looked to him as his mask and beard ignited around his face. To the hotel, all of you, he bellowed. His raging tone brought some out of their shock while others stood there, happy and content due to his presence. But they weren't moving. Move, he declared, fire arcing off his form to motivate them. That inspired anyone else that was unwilling to move before. Streams of people flowed past on either side of him, giving him their thanks as they moved towards safety. NG stood vigilant, eyes on a swivel for any additional security drones. There weren't any, but more pressingly, the sounds of battle were present in the central hall, where the gala was supposed to be. Endeavor couldn't help but sneer. What was that showboating oaf doing? He was there, in the thick of it, but he wasn't pulling his weight. That idiot, didn't the so-called #1 hero know that people in there needed saving? That his family was there? He stormed forwards, fire curling off of him so intensely that metal trash cans turned to slag and concrete steamed under his feet. Endeavor didn't know what had caused all of this, but whoever was responsible, they were going down. Hard. Minutes prior, it was dark in this enclosed space. She had scrambled in there when she heard the first gunshots. All she wanted to do was explore this place. Daddy always held off on that due to work getting in the way. But on the night of the iExpo opening night gala when he was invited, she finally got her chance to explore Daddy's workplace. She'd always dreamed of working there someday, but he didn't want to show her. No place for kids and all that. She went down more and more floors, happy to be away from his smothering self, annoying as it was, and managed to even get down to the cold basement where a bunch of servers the size of houses were. And the entire basement was as big as an apartment complex. But then, gunshots rang out. People began dying. She did the first thing she could by dashing off to a janitor closet and hiding. She heard footsteps and covered her mouth, her eye at the keyhole of the door. She could even hear the clanging of blades, and an assortment of people passed as the young black-haired girl did her best not to make a sound. HMMPH, all clear here, the massive swords with a male voice said. The girl heard footsteps and saw someone approach from the other side. Yeah, just finished my route too. Seems like we have this place in lockdown. Now we hold the fort and wait till Wolfram gets the goods. It was a woman, a sly-sounding one at that as she got a look at her from the keyhole, albeit briefly. Body armor all over her, armed with a pistol, short buzzed brown hair. But what stood out was that one of her eyes was missing, and in its place was a bright multifaceted gem of some kind in her eye socket. But gotta check on our prospects first. Oh, she moved her hand rapidly as her jewel eye glowed and displayed some kind of holographic screen as the man with swords on his very hands walked over. Oh bingo, she chirped, hand on her earpiece. Pipe down Joker, and not so loud, barked a male voice on the other side. You're looking for Melissa Shield, yeah, said this Joker. One of my prospects is with her now. Where? The other voice demanded in satisfaction. First basement, bunch of brats, Joker said, the holograph before her showing a first-person display of someone talking to an assortment of people, mostly Asian save for a blonde-haired girl. I'll send some men down there, they'll flush them out to you if able. Sounds like a plan, big dog. Joker replied back, grinning darkly. Me and the gang will prepare. Joker out. She let her hand fall. Okay Claude, let's get Obi, Morgana, and Leonard ready. Big fight coming our way. Possibly. I recognize some of those kids from the recent sports festival, Joker said. They're all finalists. Aren't they still a bunch of brats? The man asked. Joker scoffed. If you're going to blow a job on underestimating the group of kids that could fill a stadium with ice or blast through concrete like it was paper mache, go right ahead. Something clicked into place, and the safety of something else flipped off. I'm making damn sure I'm getting paid for this shit. The two walked, and slowly a terrified set of eyes watched as the mercenaries moved out. The girl huddled in the closet, keeping quiet, and prayed silently. For someone. Anyone. Alright, let's make this simple. Mercenary company running rampant took over the most technologically advanced island in the world, and the #1 hero is locked away. It was honestly sad that this wasn't even the worst party that Peter had gone to. Alright, we might have to fight fire with fire. Shoto quirked an eyebrow. Maybe give him a taste of your own medicine would have worked better. Peter mused as he looked at the phone. Do you want to go over analogies and metaphors or do you want to stop this crisis? Karen asked dryly. Now then, listen up, I have a plan. Melissa, the blonde girl perked up. Can the security room be disabled remotely? Well, you could, but you'd either have to knock out all the power, or find a way to hack into the servers. Then, you get full access to the island and everything within that isn't under a dozen layers of firewalls. She answered. A dozen firewalls. How boring. Karen replied cheekily while Melissa put her hands on her hips, brow quirked up. Anywho, that itself answers my own question. We can solve a lot of things on this island if we go for the brain of the island itself. The servers that run all the bandwidth and internet here. What would you consider the heart then? Fayumi asked. Bit of a non sequitur, but that would be Melissa Shield's father. The main villain seemed intent on taking your father from that broadcast. Know where he might take him? Karen asked. The girl looked nervous, but she nodded. I'm not sure. He could take him anywhere. But if he's keeping him alive. Melissa cupped her chin in thought. The vault. It's over my dad's office. But why there? Well, I mean, vaults hold important stuff. Peter mused. No, it's not like a typical bank vault. It's a public display one. All the gear up there is on display. They're fakes. Then he may be going to David's office. Izuku spoke up. It's why he took him there after all. Maybe he has something on his computer. But it doesn't add up. Melissa shook her head. If they wanted only what was on his PC, they would have done it a lot more quietly. And without all this hostage stuff, why bother going through with it? Ms. Shield seems to be on the right track here. Karen spoke out. Before the satellites went out, I had access to in-depth information on Island. The vault is as Melissa described, a public display, probably for higher-ups within the Foundation that can be accessed via a steel door. Yet that villain needs him up there, so something is legit up there. Peter finished for her. We're running out of time. What's our plan here? Shoto cut in, stepping forward as he reached up and loosened his tie. We have to save David's shield and stop that villain no matter what. But the entire island is under his control. Izuku muttered, looking down. And that is where I come in. Karen said proudly. If I can get into the system here on Island, particularly the servers so that I can sneak right in without needing to trigger an alarm, and have the entire island freed and under my control. Peter perked up. But your safeguard thing, wouldn't that be an issue for a city-state like Island? Peter didn't notice, but Izuku cocked an eyebrow. I cannot access government or military installations, Peter. Karen was smirking with that tone. But man-made islands designed by a private company. That's fair game. So we better move fast. Me and Karen can handle going to the servers. Melissa, you know where they are. 5th basement level. Melissa pointed towards the stairs. I don't think the elevators will work assuming we trigger any alarms if they have this island on lockdown. Best place to access and control the servers would be the main terminal at the back end of the room. Giant supercomputer past all those server towers, can't miss it. Okay, are there any USB cords on you guys? Like any phone charger stuff? Peter inquired. Mine is my purse and I left it back at the gala. Fayumi rubbed her arm. Didn't bring mine. Melissa shook her head. Me neither. Damn, could use Momo's help. Peter cut himself off, and suddenly the mood changed. He felt a growing pit in his stomach at this thought. Yaoyorozu's here, isn't she? Fayumi asked, sensing where this conversation was going as he could sense that his feeling was indeed mutual. She's either being held hostage, or she's out there against those robots, we don't know. Izuku replied. His voice was firm. Listen, we can only focus on what we can do right now. Besides, Yaoyorozu can handle herself. The American boy sighed. Leave it to Midori to be a calming influence. Sooner we get Karen into the system, the better. You guys take the elevators then? Peter asked, assuming they're not on lockdown. Fayumi looked away, holding her arm. Shoto spoke up next. So our best route to get to the top of the tower is the stairs. Izuku finished for him. We won't be able to make it in time. Todoroki, can your ice surge carry us up there? I could try, but I'll slow down fast. 200 floors plus. The height of this tower is no joke, Shoto said stoically as he looked back to the green-haired youth. If I can get into one of the elevators, I can bust into the circuitry to hardwire it. Melissa stepped up. But I need to be inside one of them and play with the wires. So that settles it. Izuku nodded. Peter, will you need anyone to help you down below? I can handle it He turned, finding Mei looking somewhat nervous, which was unnatural on her face, even with her smile. She cringed. That security camera is active. She pointed and sure enough, nestled in a corner just past some pipes he could see a camera blinking with a red light. Well crud, we better move, Fayumi said. Stay close to me. Shoto put a hand on his sister's arm, looking at Izuku. Midoriya, I'll back you up. I don't think my quirk would be beneficial in a server room unless we want this island to sink into the ocean. Me and Mei will go down below and handle the servers. With any luck, you won't have to play with wires like Jack Bauer and it's a smooth ride to the top. Or All Might beats you up there and all's well, the brown-haired boy said as he went to the door that led to the further basement stairwell. They know we're here. Can't hide it now. Ruby saw Parker depart from the group and smirked, her eyes showing his line of sight as he left the first floor and headed to the stairwell. Hey Wolfram, Shield's daughter is with some strong-ass kids. UA, sports festival types, she said with her hand to her earpiece as she walked amongst the towering servers within the cold room. Who am I looking at exactly? He replied gruffly. Something wrong with the ride up to the top. We're at floor 115, but it's gonna be slower when we pass 175. He growled, making Ruby quirk an eyebrow. Anyways, I have a team going over to the basement now. Better establish a defensive perimeter and guard the elevators. If at all possible, destroy them, she suggested. We got escape choppers for you guys, right? On call? Yeah. You have yours waiting on standby at the hangars by the airport. My men will have them open and my pilots will pick us up when we have what we want. Good. We'll get into position. Peter and Mei were trotted across the third basement floor as they departed that stairwell, heading towards the fourth floor. The walls were becoming more gunmetal gray than the inviting whites and blues from before, as this was becoming more of the tedious part of iTower's facilities, no doubt, where the all-nighters, janitors, and IT techs worked around the clock. Okay, so if they have the servers on lockdown, Mei, Peter said as they got to the doorway leading to the fourth stairwell. The sign to the side identified that it led to basement levels 4 and 5, meaning this would be the last one. I'm gonna have to take them down. Can you do me a favor? Sure. Wish up? She asked with a grin. You seem awfully calm. Would it be better if I was freaking out and making sure that everyone on the island knows where we are? She asked. Ew, no. Peter tried. That shouldn't be a question, Peter, Karen said in his ear. Give me a break. I'm about this close to breaking out die-hard quotes, and that's not how anyone would want to live their weekend. Mei didn't comment on his reference. Neither did Karen. Both of them were probably on the lookout. Mei's quirk-enhanced eyes scanned every surface, looking for traps or just enemies in general. Walking down to the final step of the basement, the label Basement Level 5 was emblazoned over the door leading inwards. Mei nodded in confirmation of something, but he trusted her to mean that it was good to open. A quick twist later, he paused, inching his head through the doorway. Both sides were clear, with the exception of the rotating cameras. 2 cameras, he said, glancing down at his wrists and sighing. He was gonna bring his web shooters with him from now on to any event, unnecessary or not. Probably would have spotted us anyway since you poked your head out, but no biggie. The Pinkette mused. He handed his phone to May, and the girl looked down at it. Can you keep her safe? My hardline connection is letting me get a signal through to this platform through the Faraday cage. If something happens to it, I'll be cut off like all other external signals from the island. This phone gets destroyed, you're on your own, Karen explained from the phone, and May looked down at her, then back to Peter with her eyes creased in worry, but her smile still present, but not as wide. Yeah, I'll keep her safe. May gave him a warm smile. Thank you. Peter patted her on the shoulder and gave her the phone. Okay, I'll go first. Ready? The Pinkette nodded, and Peter took a deep breath. Go time, he uttered, opening the door and walking forward with her, taking the lead as they exited the stairwell. The servers seemed to take up the whole sublevel. They were standing in a large box-like warehouse, with servers hugging the walls and lined up perfectly along the room, reaching high like stacked bookshelves. At the far end of the room he could spy a glass pane door with a large computer terminal inside. Had to be the control room. His spider senses exploded, coming from behind. He grabbed May and embraced her, launching both of them to the side. The door to the stairwell entry was blown apart by an explosive as the two landed. They rolled across the ground, Peter on top of her as May screamed, clutching the phone to her chest. You would have been better off hidden in a broom closet till this whole thing blew over, kid. A voice called from above. Peter looked, finding a familiar redhead with a pixie cut. He blinked, staring at the woman. Briat, my first fan turns out to be a terrorist. That's just my luck, he muttered, helping May back to her feet as he turned to look at the stairwell doorway where a fat, bald black guy was standing, pulling a machine gun out of his gut as he lumbered through the shattered remains of the door. I may ask you once, Ruby, if that was her name, drawled, leaning over the railing of the catwalk above, rifle in hand. In the place where her eye patch was, Peter could make out something shiny in there, like a gemstone of sorts. Sit there, play nice, and you and your girlfriend won't get killed tonight. Give me a hard time. She cocked the rifle menacingly. And winning that sports festival will be the highlight of your very, very short life. Peter, Karen whispered in his ear. This close, I can hack into the local camera feeds. There's 5 of them. 2 more by the north side, 1 to the west. They're surrounding you. Keep them off of May, and I can lead her through to the terminal without being seen. The servers would give them a natural cover, both to hide and from gunfire. Their enemies couldn't cause too much damage to them. Otherwise the whole island's security system would shut down and All Might would be freed anyway. Probably why they were asking him to just play nice. Okay, May. He swallowed, looking at the girl whose eyes now glimmered with tears, but still she clutched the phone tight, looking directly at him and hanging on his every word. Peter felt sick. When I say that I need you to run, listen to Karen from the phone. Okay. She gave a single, shaky nod. Peter turned his eyes up, looking to Ruby as the woman eyed him with an all-too-smug smirk on her face. All right, he said, loud enough for her to hear. I give. Good boy. She looked to the black guy, jerking her head. If you would please. The man reached into his stomach, his hand and forearm sinking into his exposed gut as light seemed to shimmer as his hand was inside, reminding him of Momo's creation quirk, only to pull out some heavy-duty handcuffs, the kind meant to restrain strength quirks. He tossed the cuffs, put them on. The heavy metal clanked hard over the floor and Peter reached for it. He watched the man out of his peripheral vision. He lowered the rifle just a hair, and Peter threw the cuffs straight at him. The man brought the rifle up, only for the heavy cuffs to slam into the rifle, and then his chest, denting the rifle visibly, rendering the weapon completely useless as Peter rushed forward, shouting behind him. Run! He heard May get up and start to run, her sneakers thumping against the floor. He heard Ruby curse and Peter pushed himself faster, leaping up and over the still reeling black guy to land behind him, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back as he leveraged his massive strength advantage to force the man in front of him, using him as a human shield. His spider senses tingled, west side. He turned his head, looking and finding some projectiles rushing towards him, each visibly distorting the air as they barreled towards him with the size of golf balls. He kicked the black guy in the back, shoving him straight into a server with a crash as he leapt up and away to clutch the side of a high server, skittering along the walls to break line of sight as he heard the strange projectiles hit the wall in bursts of air. His senses tingled again, turning his gaze up towards Ruby where the woman fired 2 quick shots from her rifle. He dodged once, jerking to barely avoid the other as it grazed his side. Dropping back down to the ground level he ran, rushing into cover to gain some distance in the maze of servers. Hey door, yelled the black guy, coughing and wheezing in pain. Hit the girl, she's heading around the side. May. Peter moved, rushing as fast as he could. He didn't know where she was or who the hell door was, but he couldn't let her get hurt. He was just about to rush across an open lane between the servers when his spider sense exploded across his brain, screeching at him of danger. He stopped dead, swiveling fast, and only just felt the bullet graze across his ear in a heart-stopping moment that spiked his adrenaline and sent his heart to racing. What the bullshit? His eyes snapped up towards Ruby, still on the catwalks, snarling as she adjusted the rifle in her hands, infuriated at the near miss. She fired off another shot and Peter ducked past her firing lane, into the cover of another server as he felt the bullet rip across the loose back of his suit jacket. He breathed, slowing down his heart before looking around and assessing the damage. This was a rental, he complained loudly, hoping to draw more attention to himself. He heard May scream, a shout of pure fright. And Peter didn't waste another second. Rushing to where he heard the sound, he spotted May backing away from someone at the other side of a server tower. He smashed straight through it. Wire, shards of metal, plexiglass, and everything else was blown apart, the debris smashing into someone that Peter bowled over before his spider senses exploded in warning again, and he brought his arm up, feeling knives dig into the flesh of his forearm as he blocked a strike with little more than a suit and dress shirt to act as armor. A man with a pale complexion, glasses, and slick green-black hair had a scowl, his katana-like blades sprouting from each of his fingers as he swiped and slashed at Peter. What made it more complex was the unique ring-like device around his head, and he had some kind of plastic metal boots that made him hover above the ground. Peter ducked and weaved between the blows before countering with a solid left hook that slipped between his opponent's guard. It sent the man reeling, hover boots carrying him back in an uncontrolled spin to slam into another server tower. His spider senses tingled. Above, snapping his gaze straight upwards, he half expected to see Ruby again. But it wasn't her. Instead, it was a winged monster, screeching loud enough to make his ears ring before it slammed straight into him. His new opponent's legs crashed down onto Peter's arms as his own legs buckled beneath him and he crashed to the ground. Go, he screamed again, feeling and seeing May jump in fright before she turned away, and did just that. The monster above him screeched and howled, trying to claw at his face and eyes, looking to tear him open as Peter did his best to fend off the monster. He was stronger, but those claws were sharp, tearing into both skin and flesh. Finally, he managed to get his feet between them and kicked it off. It scrambled back to its feet, but he was faster. Twisting to plant his feet on a server, he struck with an uppercut that clocked the bat thing right along the underside of its jaw, knocking it on its back before he performed a jumping flip off the server to crash onto the fallen monster in a drop kick that smashed into its ribs. His spider sense tingled and he ducked back and away, avoiding a swipe of the Freddy Krueger impersonator before he leapt back and high, gaining some distance, and sprinting away along the server. He felt himself being pulled down to the ground suddenly, yelling as if some invisible hand of God was grabbing him and smashing him down. The air exploded out of him, the metal floors buckling and denting under the impact. Spider senses tingled before he did a backwards roll, getting back into cover just before the black guy hosed down the lane he'd landed in with machine gun fire. Damn, what was that? Was Thaw? Peter yelled in surprise as he felt himself being tugged out of cover, going towards the wall in a curve as his sense flared up. He twisted, latching onto another server with his fingers and forcing himself to cling to it with all his might. The metal buckled, gave way and was ripped clean off, but it had stalled him enough apparently to throw off the shot. The sniper bullet ripping through his side and emerging clean out the other end. Pain seared across his body. He hit something hard, bringing him to a stop, but he didn't have time to catch his breath. He forced himself to move, all but diving into cover as Ruby took another shot. He took a breath, making a mental tally as his hand cradled his now bleeding side, feeling the sticky warmth of his own blood. All right, fat guy that can pull stuff out of his gut. Ruby doing a Professor Snipe impression. Freddy Krueger, and a freaky bat thing. So that must mean the guy he knocked down when he ripped through the server to get to May was the one pulling him around the room. Maybe when he touched the guy. Had to be. Otherwise he'd be tossing May around too. He heard footsteps drawing close and the lights above suddenly went dark, bringing the whole room into almost complete darkness. Karen, the hell's going on? Someone said. Must have damaged some of the systems with all this gunfighting. Ruby's voice crackled through the radio. Get the girl. I don't have eyes on her. On it. No you don't, Peter thought, forcing himself to his feet before turning and running. Izuku led the way as Melissa trailed behind him, Todoroki taking the rear with Fayumi as the four ran across the basement halls. Seeing the security cameras, Todoroki wisely used his ice to freeze the wall, and the cameras to halt their progress. Using Melissa's guidance, they got to the corridor where the elevator shaft was. Here, Izuku yelled, pointing at the multiple doors of the first basement floor elevators as Melissa ran up to the panel, pressing on the button. The holographic display above it blared access denied. I need to get into the wiring by removing this panel. Izuku reached forward before Melissa put a hand on his. Delicately, like a blowtorch or something. I don't have any tools to get it otherwise. Here, let me. Fayumi stepped forward, smiling and lifting up a finger as a steady flame emitted from it. She knelt down and began to flare her quirk as she began to slowly trail her finger down the metal, cutting through the light pane. It will take a moment. The sound of footsteps made them pause, and Todoroki turned, lashing out his arm as ice surged out en masse down the other direction, much like how he conjured the glacier at the sports festival's War of the Flags. The hallway was smothered in ice, and they could hear shouts of surprise and orders to advance. Villains, Todoroki growled. He heard a roar, and the ice was being chipped away. Izuku stood behind him, glowing. Any faster? He asked, looking back to Fayumi. I gotta be steady, I'm going as fast as I can. She yelled back, and then they heard loud crashes from the other side of the glacial barriers. They have power type or transformation quirks, Todoroki uttered, looking back. Midoriya, I can erect the glacier barrier again, but we will have to take out those stronger villains first. When they come through, we take them down, and I get the barrier up in a hurry. Izuku glowed green and nodded, lightning arcing around him. Leave it to me. They could see the outline as the first power type user neared. Okay, here they come. Todoroki levied his arm, warming up to get rid of the frost on his red suit. The ice was broken down, and a massive man in Kevlar towering at 10 feet tall burst through. He looked like a Japanese Oni, with giant muscular features, purple skin, a bushy white beard, gnarly teeth, and a horn. Not so, Texo as. Smash. And he got a fist right to the face, and the giant was sent sprawling with a gargled roar, smashing into some of his fellows on the way. One for all, 10%, and the power rushed through him as he leapt into the fray, tackling the first surprised merc he could see with a leaping punch and sending the armored villain flying. He heard a roar and saw something green flash by as he yelped, falling backwards as he avoided small arms fire. The other power type was some hulking man with the head of a person combined with the claws and legs of a lion. Izuku leapt away, back into the elevator room as Todoroki sent another massive surge forward, pushing away the old ice and catching the rest of the armed men in the process. That'll hold him. Todoroki turned towards his sister. Progress. Halfway. Done. Fayumi uttered. They heard more yelling, and Izuku just barely made out the English words for backup. He turned towards her. They're gonna bring more down here. Just gotta. He caught himself, seeing one of the lights above the elevator doors glowing. The icon indicating the second floor was glowing. And moving down to the first floor. They're gonna flank us, Izuku called, as he heard small explosions on the other end. They had to be using grenades to get at the ice, keeping their distance this time. Todoroki ran to where he was, seeing the elevator that was going down about to settle on the basement icon as he aimed with his left. As the door opened, he surged out his ice, catching the villains and freezing them within as they yelled in surprise. They'll bring down more, he said, turning back to Fayumi as she continued going over the panel delicately with her flame. We need to hurry. Todoroki, can you frost this over to cool it down? Melissa stepped back as the two boys walked up. The dual-haired youth obliged, freezing over the panel lightly as the sides steamed from the sudden burst of cold. With that done, Izuku dug in with his fingers, grimacing as he used one for all to strengthen his fingers and pull the panel like a door. As it screeched, he exposed the wiring and circuitry within. My turn, boys. Melissa knelt down as Fayumi stood up, slightly shaking her finger and sucking on it. Todoroki turned. Your finger. He took her hand, seeing that her index fingertip had the skin peeling back. Sorry, been a hot minute since I used my quirk for that long. Okay, move the wiring here, Melissa uttered, tinkering around inside. Should activate the system. The sound of a walkie-talkie being on caught their ears. Give me a status report. What's going on down there? Yelled a gruff male voice. Got it, Melissa declared, and with a ding, the elevator door opened, all of them turning and getting inside. What do you mean you lost control of that elevator? Wolfram barked as his elevator strolled past floor 194. The other mercs were giving him a wide berth, with shield by their side and quiet as the red-haired man yelled into his earpiece. As they ascended the tower, they could see the dim-lighted view of Island at night, swathed in red with the lockdown in place. They must have hardwired it. I'm trying to commandeer it, but it's no good. Swordkill responded. If they do hardwire it, where would they go? I got a team ready to hold security here, Swordkill said. We have knockout gas at the ready. Fine, you hold it there. If they come your way, let me know. We only need the girl alive, and that can be. He turned, glaring at the founder of the Shield Foundation. A very broad term. You won't hurt her, David uttered out. One of his men gave him a rifle butt to the back for his comment. What's the situation in ballroom 3? I sent some men down to the basement after those brats. I can call them back to infiltrate that room. Fine, Wolfram muttered. Go in hot. Leave no one alive. You can't. Those are civvy. Shut up. Wolfram backhanded the uppity plump scientist against the wall, stunned. He growled at the sight of the groaning man as his men let him sit there dazed, looking out to the rest of Island. David said nothing, looking distraught as Sam groaned. Split the team watching over the first floor to ballroom 3 in. Sir, look, said Parks, and Wolfram turned. What? He saw it. Out in the city, where big fiery explosions. I need cameras on the city. What's going on? If Joker fucked things up in her fight against those kids in the server room. Getting cameras up now, Sorkil said, sending feed to your tablet. The red-haired man reached into his coat pocket, pulling out his phone and seeing the screen display a street filled with security drones. They were firing laser whips and bullets at something, before a gout of flame consumed them as big as the street, making Wolfram's eyes widen. The drones exploded, and leaping down was a man in a torn-up business suit swathed in flame. And red hair. ID, now, Wolfram growled. Checking, Swordkill replied, and as they rose up to floor 195 and stopped, the door opening and closing, Wolfram bit his lip. The one thing that can fuck up over a job was a surprise. He hated surprises. No way. What? Who was that? Wolfram asked, sensing the fear in his lieutenant's voice. Sir, the match is that of a top 10 hero from Japan. It's Endeavor. What? Wolfram uttered. The only top 10 pro hero from any country coming here was All Might. Those private plane dossiers and registry said so. I know. It's like he just appeared out of nowhere. There were no cruises coming in, and checking over the commercial flights now, Wolfram growled, pocketing his phone. Oh crap, Swordkill spoke up some more. His route. He's heading here for the tower, but his fire can't get through the metal barriers on the first floors. Martinez spoke, listening in on their conversation. We should be safe. You want to bank on that? Wolfram growled. Martinez, leave a few men to watch over the first floor Cybes. Direct the team from the basement and the second floor from most of them watching the other ballrooms outside to get into position. Direct Laszlo's team to keep an eye on ballroom 3. Doesn't look like they're gonna do much of anything, but if they do, gun them all down the moment you hear something funny on the second floor. Wolfram ordered. Swordkill, keep an eye on those cameras. Joker, busy right now. This little spider doesn't know when to stay put and die. Yelled Joker on her end, gunfire heard. Oh bye. Find that pink-haired bitch and put a bullet in her skull. Kill. Get the lights back on in here. We're in the fucking dark. Quit having a period over it. I'm directing power now. Swordkill scoffed. Wolfram sighed and breathed through his nose. The intel was all coming bellafuck up now. His client and David had given him the dossier to all private planes that heroes took. So how in the goddamn hell did the number 2 hero in Japan wind up here? It surprised Momo how quickly she could function automatically. Her hands moved practically on their own, even as her quirk kept making everything that they would need. Which was a lot, especially when it came to the fact that the room was no doubt about to be besieged by several armed mercenaries who more than likely wouldn't want to take any prisoners in. You're overthinking things. Momo flinched slightly at her mother's tone, and despite the gravity of the situation, seeing her mother check several grenades with one hand while adjusting the sights on her quirk was still surreal. She grabbed some of the bread the tables had and munched on it. Just how are we going to get everyone out of here? Once they realize holding this position will do them more harm than good, they'll leave us alone, Maya said, and once All Might is freed, we'll be the last thing they'll have to worry about. Speaking of which, how is he? She didn't direct the question towards Momo, it was instead pointed at one of the other guests. An older man with a peppered beard and enough mass to fill out his suit, by the name of Timothy Bale. The man had volunteered to help get them eyes on the number 1 hero. Courtesy of the device Momo had conjured up, a long tethered camera with a single lens. He had walked backward from the balcony overlooking All Might's ballroom back to hers, then connected the wiring to someone's smartphone who had a full charge. Struggling. Those light tethers are tight around him, but he seems to be managing. I think he's trying to get into a position where he can get those villains before they turn on the hostages, if I had to guess, the man answered. Maya let out a sigh of relief, a feeling that Momo shared, though it did have some downsides. Not the stealthiest of plans, but the mercenaries already knew that this room was compromised, so anything else wouldn't exactly make any difference. With that in mind, the rest of the guests that were willing to work, and those who were unwilling to be under the ire of Maya continued barricading the doors. Cables for the raw weight and TV wires to tie the doors together. Within the 15 minutes that they first took control of the room, They practically had several barricades, and even some firing lines. Though, those firing lines only had people with meager protection firearms, and that was only the people that had them in the first place. Under the fire of military-grade weaponry, they wouldn't last. Besides Maya herself, they barely had 10 weapons to the room's name, taking whatever firearms and ammunition they had from the dead mercenaries. Not a situation where anyone would want to be in, so Momo was evening the odds. Flashbangs, grenades, web bombs, anything that everyone with a hand could use when the situation came down to it. Everything they needed to last a bit longer before the #1 hero freed himself. So it's only a matter of time, Momo muttered. We can only hope, Maya commented. Hang on, I see movement. Bale spoke out. A few mercs are leaving the room. Why would they lessen All Might's guard? Maya mused. For all we know they may just be moving outside. Bale said, looking back to the chestnut-haired woman. Or they're going to back up the breach team and kill all of us faster. Her gaze hardened when the sound of wood splintering filled the small room. What little conversation that was happening between the other guests died. On the south end, the door started to bend outwards with a massive crash. Everyone ready, Maya called. She raised her weapon, taking a stance next to her daughter. Momo in turn brought up 2 different explosives, and the others put themselves behind the cover in metal shields that the black-haired beauty had made for them. Those who didn't or couldn't fight ran to the back of the room behind additional cover. They didn't have to win, just last until All Might arrived. Peter breathed hard in the hallway as he slumped against the wall. He closed his eyes, hearing yelling from that ruby chick from out in the main foyer. The only lights there were the blinking lights of the servers. Fucking hell, kill, get those lights back up. I can't find Parker without those lights. He heard her cry out. He heard more voices, one of them gruff. Let me use my echolocation. I can find him and the girl. Echolocation, didn't dolphins use that? And that's, Peter uttered under his breath, wincing as his hands ached. He was in pitch black darkness in a hallway, leaning against the middle. Do it, Morg. They had some plan when they had their little huddle up top. Has to revolve around that phone he gave her. Peter's mind raced as he looked at the ground. Okay, so Ruby knew of the plan back on the first basement floor. But what about the phone? That was right before they entered the server room. He gave it to Maya, but East Corridor. Movement. The gruff female voice roared, and his blood froze. Sense flaring up. Peter legged it, running as he got to the illuminated hallway with windows looking out to the blinking servers. Right when a massive bat monster crashed through, claws stretched over the shower of broken glass as Peter closed his eyes. He ducked and grabbed her outstretched wing claw and gave her a punch right to the face, slamming the beast into the wall using her momentum and turned, sprinting. Legged Leo. Grab him. He heard Ruby bark. Peter felt his sense tingle as he performed a diving leap into the other hallway, rolling as he seemed to avoid danger, and turned. He saw the pop of a grenade being launched from a rifle, and he momentarily caught a glimpse of the leering obese black man, holding not 1 but 2 rifles with grenade launchers in his strong meaty hands. They were trying to box him in. He turned and sprinted backwards, dodging left and right to avoid rifle fire as he got to the open space and did his best to leap forward. His sense was still up, and he felt himself become grabbed by the invisible hand of God and be sent flying out of the corridor in an arc. Up in the rafters, he saw the man with his glowing hands aimed at him. He crashed into the wall, and his sense flared hard again as he moved his head aside. The ping of a sniper shot just missing his ear but causing a ringing as he fell to the ground. Come on, he heard Ruby yell as Peter was dropped, and landed on his feet as he felt the sharp pain in his legs. Within the server tower rose, Peter ran, arms pumping as he sought cover, running as fast as he could. No sign of sword guy, which meant he was looking for May. He barreled through a side door, in the dark of an office as he heard the sound of a frightened yelp coming from somewhere. It was young sounding too. Wah! He turned, seeing the janitor closet within, and he saw movement at the end, the room barely lit only from the light of the servers. Then he heard a pinging noise and turned, seeing 2 grenades land outside the office. Peter dove, grabbing the desk as he flipped it over himself, bunkering down, hands to his ears as he shielded himself. The grenades went off, fire and fury erupting. He was pushed against the janitor closet, yelping in pain as he panted, groaning. The desk bore the brunt of the blasts, but the wood was splintered, and his vision was getting hazy. Save May. Save her. Mister. It was the voice as Peter turned, panting as the fire spread around the room before the sprinklers went off. Before they did, his vision was blurry, but he saw it, if only for a moment, and the voice and scared breathing confirmed it. A scared little girl with black hair looking through the busted crack, hands on her ears and eyes wide with fright. Peter panted. There was someone here. He's still alive, Ruby shouted. The girl's in there with him. Peter blinked. This wasn't May. Peter closed his eyes, and his spider sense flared. His enemy swooped into the wide open and smoldering office like a bat out of hell, wings outstretched to land. He heard the girl within 2 feet in front of him scream, and the bat reeled, caught by surprise. Huh? That's no. Peter grunted, kicking his legs back into the desk, right into the surprised Batwoman who was sent flying courtesy of a hot and charred desk. Hearing her yell as he stood up. Okay, she knew he was alive. She knew that there was a girl here with him. He'd barely seen her in the dark. She kept complaining about not being able to find him without lights. And her eye was a gemstone of some kind. Maybe she could see him. Or through him. She'd seen him in the hallway with everyone. Even saw him giving the phone to May. Seeing. He shut his eyes tight before he took a deep breath and sprinted out of the room. His spider sense kicked into gear as he leapt. His sight blinded as he shut his eyes tight. He could just sense it across his mind, the faint outline of the server towers as he ran out of the burning office towards the struggling and writhing Batwoman. As if time had slowed down, he heard gunshots, in his blindfolded state as bright red sparks far away. What the fuck? Ruby yelled from afar, and he could make out her form for a blip before it vanished into the black. He stepped forward, leaping up and giving a Pele to the still dazed bat monster, right to the back of the head as he sent her snout first into the ground. He used her head as a jump-off point to land beside where the bent and broken table was. He heard footsteps in the rafters, closing in on him. Orbit him up. Ruby yelled. Oh bye. Gun the fucker down. He grabbed the leg of the table, and like a discus thrower, Peter grunted as he chucked the table with all of his might at the rafter before leaping upward himself. The table shattered, but it made the overlook wobble as the man stumbled and screamed. He landed behind him, and Peter pivoted on the spot with a lightning-fast roundhouse kick. The blow caught him in the head as the man let out a squawk before flying off the rafter and landing in a heap on the nearby server tower. His sense flared, his darkened world lighting up once more as he jumped and twisted, running fast along the rafters to avoid gunfire from the far right and the immediate left. The far right was far more intense. It was the fat Albert on roids. He got to the edge and launched himself, feeling the bullets whiz by him. He twisted, but one finally clipped him in the shoulder and Peter felt the pain turn his vision white, bones shattering and blood bursting just as the man ran out of ammo. Peter landed beside him, and he turned with a punch right into the man's stomach with his still usable arm. He let out a wheezing cough before Peter gave him another punch in the jaw, then another, followed by running up his tall fat body and finishing his opponent off with a kick square to the chin, sending him flying off of his feet and onto his back. His sense flared as he twirled, avoiding the incoming sniper fire. He tried to move his left arm, but found that he couldn't. The pain was too much. He heard movement down one of the halls and turned, sensing something hovering off the ground and accelerating away, along with the patter of footsteps. May. Peter grit his teeth and began to sprint, running as fast as he could. Thankfully, it was all in one straight line as his legs pushed him on. The Freddy Krueger wannabe was right behind May with his finger blades scratching the walls like nails on a chalkboard as he zoomed after her on his hover boots. Nighty night, Peter yelled, dashing forward with a launching punch as he sensed the outline of Budget Freddy turn in utter shock. And the left jab got him right in the jaw, hearing bone crack as a result of his blow. The man was sent sprawling, skidding across the floor like a rolling sack of potatoes before crashing into the metal wall down at the very end of the darkened corridor. He could hear Ruby calling into her comm. He turned as he leapt up, moving away from May as he ran across the server towers, his footsteps echoing as he saw the outline of the server towers around him. As he ran into the black, he could sense it, the bullets whizzing past as he ducked and stepped aside. His ears rang and his heart pounded, but the frustrated yelling and the footsteps on the rafters above gave him a large bright neon target. He jumped, grabbing onto the railing with his one good hand and running along it, leaping and twisting as he avoided pistol fire, and landed right before her. He caught her pistol in his hand and crushed it in his grip as he pulled her in, delivering a headbutt right to the mouth of the taller woman. Ruby gargled, staggering as Peter heard something clatter to the ground. He tossed away her firearm that he had taken from her. He could see her now, reaching for her knife as she lunged with animalistic fury. Peter dodged the knife jab and countered with a sledgehammer-like punch right to the chest that sent her to the floor down below. Her chest was rising and falling, but in a pained fashion. Peter took a deep breath. Finally opening his eyes, he stared over the scene of destruction across the room. He panted, trying to catch his breath as he ran his only good hand through his hair, pulling out a fragmented tooth and flicking it aside. He leapt down to the ground floor, the sudden fall making his world spin, and Peter realized that he probably wasn't in as good a shape as he felt a minute ago. And a minute ago he felt like absolute shit to begin with. He leaned against the wall, slumping there as he let himself trail down to sit quietly at the base of a server, still trying to breathe. They had a perimeter set up around the front of the tower. 10 guys, all set up with weapons, all standing around, watching for anyone that might come through from the outside. Amateurs. Rule 1 of guarding a place of importance: don't post sentries that stood around. You had them moving, constantly overlapping within one another's patterns, so in the event that one man was taken out, another man would know within minutes, maybe even seconds of that man going down, so long as they were within eyesight. The old codger Araki told him that rule years ago when he was rising through the ranks, and these greenhorns were standing around, practically asking to be picked off. Enji decided to oblige them. Now, stealth was never his strong point. A fire-based quirk didn't lend itself to trying to be sneaky in almost any sense of the word. But he was the number 2 hero, and he didn't earn this position by simply being an idiot that rushed in guns blazing, unlike some of the other fools among the top 10. He held in his Hellflame quirk completely, a running theme lately what with him flying commercial today. But that was only one part of himself that didn't lend itself to stealth. His frame was larger than most men, the result of years upon years of training even after his time at UA. Most would be able to see him from a long way off, but mercifully Island had a penchant for shrubbery and other pointless greenery. Thankfully, the trees that hid the main road were large enough for him to take cover behind as a bunch of security drones passed along the road. What the hell were those things doing? Had the villains that had taken over the expo hack everything? That wasn't supposed to be possible. The system was supposed to move to backup drives the second an outside intrusion was detected. Yet, somehow, the villains had managed to get through both layers of security while there were dozens of pro heroes on the island and no one on the staff so much as raised a fuss. That meant professionals, or at least a talented hacker, or help from the inside. The latter was the most likely option, given how stupidly the guards around the side door were standing. They were practically lounging, watching the surrounding area with cigarettes in their mouths. They were looking towards the main road, barely looking at the sideline greenery. Yet, getting closer to them was painfully slow. Dashes between cover were quick and careful, but few and far between. 2 sets of eyes somewhat close together would give him away, so he played it slow, even if he hated to do it. Yet, like with most things in life, persistence and determination paid off. He inched closer, just at the edge of the clearing towards the side entrance, then he sprang. He ignored the noise that he was making, and the closer man turned just in time to see Endeavor barreling down on him. A quick right across the jaw staggered him, and Enji felt bone shatter under his fingers. The second man reached down for a walkie, which was perfect. In the same motion as the right, his left hand reached out, a lance of fire arching across the distance from his fingers. Red-hot fire burned through the device and onto the man himself. Shock made him freeze. Pain made him take a breath, but Enji's fist buried itself into his solar plexus. His scream died in his throat as every inch of air was driven out of his lungs. Physics and pain demanded that the mercenary fall to the ground, but Enji wrapped a massive hand around his neck. The merc's already hurt body nearly went into shutdown. A little bit of heat within his palms kept the man awake and alert. Enji made a point to keep the man encased in one hand and drag his fallen friend with the other over to the nearby greenery. The unconscious man he left in a pile while the second merc struggled in his other arm. The number 2 hero forced the mercenary to look him dead in the eye, his massive hand over his mouth and gripped tight around his jaw. Scream, and you'll be ashes on the ground before you can get anything out. Enji growled in English, perfect and crisp. The man knew that he was serious. Now, you're going to answer every question that I have. He gripped a little tighter and burned a bit of the man's skin off before he continued his interrogation. How many? Use your fingers. His eyes darted around. Enji leaned in, his hand heating up as the merc's eyes bulged and he writhed under his grasp, letting out a pained squeal. Answer me. Silently, the merc lifted his hands. The entry wouldn't be clean. Momo knew that. Her mother had pointed out exactly what she needed to do. They would breach the door, desperate to get in, hopefully using the sound and the explosives to distract and disorient, only to meet a cavalcade of artillery waiting for them. The silence was deafening, and Momo was acutely aware of the weight of her weapon in her hands. She had to keep it up, keep it steady, and ready to fire. The earplugs she gave to everyone else in the room would prove handy. One beep traveled through the doorway before Momo felt her mother gently squeeze her shoulder. Then fire. Echoes and shockwaves met them, making the entire room a cacophony of sound. Lead and fire went through the smoke, but it wouldn't dissipate. That only happened when Momo's mother threw a flashbang into the center of the smoke. Someone screamed as another dove for cover. Light filled the hallway, and several of the mercenaries scrambled to get to cover, but a mine could only do so much when overloaded by a flashbang. And in their confusion, the people behind Momo threw what she had made for them. Web grenades sailed overhead, exploding in a shower of substance that stuck several men to the floor. They struggled, but couldn't break through. But even monkeys knew how to work through things if they could see it. The next time someone threw a web grenade, a merc shot it out of the air, making it explode uselessly in front of them. Then her mother fired several shots. Momo didn't get up in time to see the men fall, but she heard them well enough. She rose up, aiming and firing herself with her web paintball gun, firing at their heads and legs as she caught a glimpse of the situation. The men had some cover of their own, using tables and furniture 10 to 15 meters away from the door to use while other men stood around the edge. She saw some men bleeding out as her mother ducked behind cover, waiting and panting as gunfire soared over their heads. She pulled out another flash, tossing it overhead. Several more joined it from the others in the room, and several men started screaming again. As one, practically everyone with a weapon moved over the cover and started throwing out everything they had, Momo included. Globs of webbing, bullets, it was all unleashed as the exchange of fire flew out. Then they went down behind cover and repeated the process. A flurry of bullets slammed into their cover, and in the moments of respite, they returned fire. It was agonizing, grueling, a constant rush of adrenaline that nearly made Momo vomit. She heard screaming, cursing, yells of pain and fury. She did her best to fight through it, firing back and flinging her gadgets as adrenaline and focus took hold. The group stood by the walls of the rising elevator, seeing their number go past the 195 mark as each teen stood by the sides. Before them, the door had a layer of ice to act as a barricade in case any of the men were waiting for them at the top. Izuku went over the plan in his head: neutralize the villains, defeat their boss, and try to save David in the meantime. He and Shoto were the fighters. They would handle him while Fayumi and Melissa would hang back near David's office below the vault. Maybe it would be enough, he hoped it would. As the elevator reached the final floor, no one said a word, and everyone tensed when the elevator dinged at the last floor. "Here we go," Shoto said, breath misting from a frost that was about to be unleashed. The door opened. He leaned out, finger raised to flick while Shoto took the other side. Nothing but large empty hallways. "That way," Melissa called, pointing down one of them. Shoto and Izuku took point with Fayumi and Melissa close behind. Every step down the hallway echoed as they turned the corner. Izuku stopped the group, and he saw at the far end of the hall that the vault door had been opened, complete with David standing at the console, with an armed gunman by his side, rifle barrel trained on him. "Okay, I got it," David said weakly. "Good, bring her down," the gunman said, and the man continued to click and tap away on the keyboard. "Got him," Izuku muttered as they slowly advanced up. He began to think. So far he could see only the merc and David. The inside of the vault might be bigger, so could they be walking into a trap? If he could use one for all to charge in and tackle the guy, Izuku's train of thought was stopped as he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned, seeing Shoto. "Leave this to me." He advanced ahead of the group quietly. "Stay back." He knelt down, placing his left hand down in front of him, and the entire floor began to get covered in frost as it surged out rapidly. The ice sprang en masse when it entered the room, catching the merc and David off guard as they were covered in ice from neck to toe. Izuku charged in and reared back a big right hand with one for all charged at 10% power. Smash! He clocked him, breaking the mercenary's ice prison and sending him into the console as he slumped to the icy floor, out cold. MHA. David shivered, looking back as Shoto ran in and placed his right hand on the ice, forcing it to thaw. "Daddy, we came," Melissa spoke out happily as Izuku saw David's face, whose eyes widened as he looked at his daughter. "No." There was a sudden loud creaking of metal, and Izuku saw metal snake out from the railings above and lunge at him, catching Izuku and sending him into a wall with a hard crash. The metal tightened like vices, Izuku grunting under the strain. Another series of metal tendrils lashed out, shattering through a rising stream of ice to pin Shoto against the wall next to him by his arm and leg. "Well, it seems using Martinez was the right move after all. And thank you again, Mr. Shield," drawled a voice as Izuku looked up. The voice came from a larger man with red hair, a beige trench coat over Kevlar gear, and a metal mask with sharp yellow eyes, another merc standing beside him, gun drawn. He stood on the balcony overlooking the room, right next to some portly man who was holding a briefcase of sorts. "Sam, you can't be doing this," David called out, still trapped in his icy prison. "Please, it can't go to him." But it must, David, Sam yelled. He seemed to have plenty of bruises himself as he looked terrified. You and I have given up too much to stop. No, Melissa. What are you doing here? He finally saw her as Melissa stood wide-eyed up at him. Daddy, what's going on? She asked, looking back at her father. Izuku took a head count. He and Shoto were trapped against the walls with metal bindings, so the big bad could use some sort of metal manipulation quirk as he strained against the steel. A rifleman was by his side, along with this Sam guy. Fayumi. She was able to stop herself from entering the room at the last moment. She was in the rear. Izuku's eyes went to the door, seeing Fayumi just peeking her head out. Go on, Mr. Shield. Tell them how the most impenetrable and most advanced landmark in the globe was able to be taken over by some random villains. Look, we have what we need. Sam spoke. Let's just go, Wolfram. Did you design the thing, or did you just bounce around ideas? The redhead, now known as Wolfram, drawled. Well, the professor designed the entirety of the device. Parks. Izuku's eyes widened, seeing the other man raise his rifle and open fire. Melissa screamed, seeing the portly man shudder before he fell over the balcony onto the icy floor. Blood oozing from his suit, eyes wide and dead. Parks leaned down and picked up the briefcase. Sam, Nuo, Melissa wailed. One less seat on the chopper. Wolfram oiled, leering down at David. You bastard. David shouted out, finding a way to speak over the ice around his body. Oh please, we all know that fat waste of space would still be alive if you hadn't contacted me in the first place. He leered, and David's face turned into a rictus of despair and pain. Daddy, Melissa gawked, eyes wide and tears in her eyes. Izuku felt his heart break as he strained and struggled against his bindings. He saw Wolfram's eyes on him as he raised his hands, his gloves glowing blue. In response, the metal around his arms tightened, and Izuku bit back a scream. Leave them alone. He yelled in English. Save it, kid. You'll be joining that fat ass over there if you don't keep your mouth shut. Daddy, you allowed all of this to happen? Melissa asked. It was only for progress, for the betterment of the world. If we could get the quirk amplifier out into the world, we would be able to help better superhuman society. Heroes would be able to accomplish so many things. The board of directors and the shareholders, they couldn't see that. They were too afraid and David confessed, tears in his eyes. I had my doubts. I could have called it off, but I saw All Might the other day and he saw All Might. Quirk amplifier. Izuku's eyes went wide. What could be he talking? Wait, David was All Might's first sidekick. Could All Might have revealed his secret to him? A pit was growing in his stomach more and more as he felt eyes on him. He looked across the vault room, seeing Shoto bound to the opposing wall as he was looking at him. And he was flicking his finger over and over. Wolfram clapped his hands. This is like something out of Shakespeare. He laughed as his hands glowed, and the metal underneath the icy floor surged and broke free. It resulted in David being freed from his icy prison, but right into Wolfram's grasp as the metal wrapped around him. Izuku saw Fayumi step closer and closer, still out of sight from Wolfram and Parks. Not yet. Melissa was still in his line of fire. He couldn't fire his 100% flick with her in it. Fayumi moved, sprinting as her hands burned with fire before she tackled Wolfram from behind, and her hands went to his face before fire erupted from her fingertips. Combined with the metal mask, with the sudden heat from her blowtorch fingers, Wolfram howled in agony. Fayumi on his back as he fired his pistol wildly and reached for her before slamming her to the side with a throw. He staggered, screaming in pain as his hands went to his face and he dropped his pistol. Fayumi cried out as she skipped across the icy floor, writhing in pain. Kill her, he roared, and Izuku saw Parks raise his rifle at Fayumi. Smash! Izuku gritted out, aiming his right ring finger at them. Gale force winds lashed out, catching the two as they slammed against the vast array of deposit box things that surrounded the walls of the vault with a crash. The briefcase was also separated from them as well as Fayumi and Melissa yelped and moved across the icy floor. David joined them, the metal being warped and freeing him as he rolled across the ground. Izuku went straight for the leader, punching through lines of metal while a wall of ice slammed into the villain's side. Shoto barely had a moment to thaw before a hail of bullets smashed into the ice barrier before him. Parks firing on him from his prone position. Stay down. Shoto hissed and ice surged, a miniature glacier roaring forth as it caught the sniper and the other villain, submerging them in ice before slamming them into the wall. Melissa, get Fayumi out of there. The girl turned upon her name being called by Izuku before going over to the fallen girl and helping her up. David was up on his feet, limping but running as he joined them. Fucking brats, yelled Wolfram from the ice, and the ice just exploded as Wolfram seemed to free himself. How did? Shoto spoke aloud. Wolfram growled, his face burnt with a portion of his metal mask seared on as he ripped it off. His skin was burning with a pink orangish hue, and steam seemed to emit from his body, enough that it burnt off what remained of his black skin mask around his mouth. His arms seemed to bulk heavily with muscle, straining his coat immensely. He let out a snarl and the hue was gone, his skin returning back to its plain color and the muscles shrinking to what they were before. Wolfram raised his fist and Izuku saw his gloved hand glow not blue but red as he ripped himself free, sending the mini glacier that had him pinned against him back at them. Izuku and Shoto dove to the side, avoiding the crashing meteor. You kids are really making this job a lot harder than it needs to be, Wolfram snarled. He raised the pistol as Izuku's legs tensed, only for his eyes to go wide when the pistol turned away from the two heroes. The gun spat fire, and something pinged against the metal wall, combined with a feminine scream. Izuku gasped, eyes wide as he watched Fayumi stumble forwards for a moment, a growing spot of blood growing from her side. She slumped against Melissa, who barely managed to keep her upright. Shoto didn't move an inch, eyes wide and mouth agape. Damn, I need to get better with this thing, Wolfram grumbled, pulling himself free from the last of the ice. Izuku saw Shoto's left hand twitch. Phew. Then the room exploded into heat. Izuku's skin screamed, the hairs on his arms torching in a second to the inferno. Melissa and David slumped forwards, trying to protect themselves as they made it to the doorway leading out of the vault, carrying a bleeding Fayumi. Ice flash melted straight into steam behind them. The heat and steam made Wolfram instinctively shield himself, but his eyes widened to the size of saucers at the sight of Shoto raising his left hand registered in his mind. You'll burn for that, Shoto roared, and hellfire exploded out of his left side. A tidal wave of pure heat raced towards Wolfram, turning metal into slag as it passed. Wolfram slammed his hand against the wall, willing the metal to take him away from the wave of fire. It angled towards the wall, which was the only thing that saved him as the fire turned his transportation into nothingness. Shoto didn't let up for a second, tracing a trail of fire in the wake of the villain. The walls of the vault glowed red hot before Shoto stopped his onslaught long enough to get a better read on the villain, his teeth bared. Shoto, be careful, Melissa screamed. You're weakening the walls. You'll make this place explode. I'll be careful when he's ashes, Shoto growled, his right side steaming in an attempt to compensate for the outburst. The villain was standing on the edge of the wall. One touch sent arcs of electricity through the steel next to him. Shoto screamed, a small wire of metal wrapping around his ankle and throwing him to the side. He skipped against the ground, hitting his left side hard. Izuku didn't call out as he flared one for all, jumping straight towards the villain while ignoring the pain in his broken right ring finger. A pillar of metal shot out, aiming to meet him in the air. The green-haired boy twisted, managing to land feet first on the side of the pillar. He ran, 2 thunderous steps denting the metal below him and getting him closer to the villain. Close enough that he saw the villain smirk. Another arc of lightning, and another pillar shot straight at Izuku from the side. Izuku turned, raising his arms. A metal pipe slammed straight into his gut, and 3 others impacted his limbs. Izuku tasted bile, right before his world went white as he smashed into the wall of the laboratory. He couldn't keep his eyes straight as the world spun, but he could feel the shift in the air as another blast of ice was thrown out. Steel beams appeared from every direction, shattering the ice like a million chandeliers. Below, Shoto's side lit up with fire as he threw another torrent, but a line of metal smashed into his wrist. Izuku heard something crack as Shoto roared in pain, his fire careening off the edge as its aim was diverted. Izuku gritted his teeth, but the steel tendril had him pinned. He could barely move his hands with the metal around him, but he could still move his fingers. That was all that All Might would need, and so it was all that he needed. Smash! He roared, one for all filling his right pinky finger to the brim. With the minuscule space that he could move, the finger flicked out. Shockwaves of power rippled out, ripping the metal that held him to shreds. It was so fast that Wolfram was blown to the other end of the wall, smashing against it hard enough for the metal to echo in the wind and form a crater. One hand touching the wall was all that saved him, a platform to hold him up coming into existence under him. Izuku shot off the wall, 10% of one for all filling him as he closed the distance. Then Izuku felt another rod smash against his side. He managed to twist away from the initial impact, holding on to the edge, his fingers on his left digging into the steel to support himself. You little fuckers are ruining everything, Wolfram said, generating a larger, slower-moving mass of metal as the 2 boys reoriented themselves. I've got a job to finish, and it sure as hell isn't going to be stopped by you 2 meddling kids. May ducked into the room and slammed the door behind her, her heart thumping like a drum under her ribs. There was a crash outside, the sound of fighting, and she felt herself flinch, choking off a scream as she pulled away from the door, phone clutched in her hand as she listened to the fight outside. Her eyes zoomed in on the door, the steel barrier rattling in place as the fight outside shook the main control room. She saw flashes of light coming from the other end of the room via the glass window. Gunfire. Hatsum, you need to listen to me, sweetie. She blinked, her mind returning to the present. She looked down at the phone, staring at the screen as Karen's symbol blinked up at her. Breathe, honey. It's okay. Peter can handle himself, but you need to do your job, okay? If you do it, I can help him. She nodded. Why, yeah, okay. A cord. You needed a cord. Her eyes glanced around, searching frantically. If you can find one, that'd be alright, but if not. She wasn't listening anymore, moving about the room while opening drawers and scouring desks and workstations. She found one, a USB link cable that didn't fit the phone. Rushing over to a work desk that looked at least semi-usable, May swept aside the crap that cluttered its surface, everything crashing to the floor in a heap as she bit off one end of the cable, nearly choking on plastic and wires before spitting it out. Her fingers brushed over the fibers, identifying the important sections she could still use before pulling a pin from her hair. She bent and twisted the small metal pin, mentally bemoaning the lack of tools before she jury-rigged a fitting and jabbed it into the phone's socket. Karen seemed to examine it. It should be enough of a connection. Plug me, but don't move me at all. This isn't exactly a hard landline. They nodded, picking up the phone and moving towards the server station. Plugging her in, the young inventor gingerly set the phone down, gently negotiating it into place while keeping the cable she'd fashioned in place before backing off. Karen blinked and dimmed, and May noted the server humming to life. Its systems came online before more and more of them followed suit as Karen took over and devoted more and more of her processes to brute forcing past the server's internal defense networks. That's when she noticed how quiet it got. She turned, looking to the door with nervous anxiety as she wrung her hands together. Peter, she called. No answer. Peter. It was Karen's voice that answered. He won. Karen's disembodied voice made her jump. She looked up, seeing an audio box on the wall. You can step out, hun, but he's hurt, Hatsum. She nodded. Stepping forward, she pushed the door open, peeking out of the door to a scene of complete devastation. Broken servers, shattered glass, shards of metal and plexiglass, spilled coolant, and the stink of burnt circuitry. She could see it clearly now as the overhead lights came online. She stepped out of the room. Peter. There was no answer for a moment. She was about to call again when, finally, May. She nearly jumped out of her skin, turning to look down the side of the server lanes where Peter's voice had come from. She took one step, and another, and then before she knew it she was running down the length of the room, halting once when she stumbled on the sight of one of the villains, the black guy, now beat up and half embedded in a server tower, before shoving it out of her mind and forcing herself to keep moving. Then she found Peter. He was sitting, collapsed really, against a wall, his clothes torn and caked in blood. His eyes opened, finding hers as he smiled. Hey. She didn't say anything, her target eyes darting to the various injuries, zooming in and focusing on them. You're hurt, she finally said, voice shaking. Peter jerked his head. You should see the other guys. He laughed. They felt tears prickling under her eyelids, her throat clogging up as she stepped forward. She knelt beside him, her trembling hands rising to press against the shoulder wound, the worst one that still oozed blood. Peter grimaced, sucking down a deep breath through clenched teeth but not complaining as she tried to staunch the bleeding. May, he finally breathed. Need you to do something for me, all right? She answered almost on automatic, her head bobbing up and down. Why, yeah. Okay. Peter gestured with his still functioning arm. Side room, down that way. There's someone else here. Not a villain. Looked like a little girl. Can you go make sure she's all right? May blinked, staring at him as Peter shifted where he sat, sucking down a sharp, hissing breath as he adjusted his weight. She didn't want to leave him alone. Not like this. But she didn't want him to move either. I'll check. She sniffed, but didn't move. Help's on the way, Peter. Medical drones en route. And security to round up these villains too. Karen spoke from the speakers. Hatsum, you did good. Go. She pulled her hands away and stared. She looked at him, at his injuries and pain. She had to fix this. Fix him. She was supposed to be good at that. It was supposed to be what she could do. But there was no baby, no easy answer, and she felt her frustration mount before she pulled away and forced herself to walk towards the side room that he'd gestured to. When she noticed that her hands were covered in caked blood, she felt nauseous, wiping them on her dress and almost crying outright when the red still stained her hands. But she kept her head somehow and kept moving, planting one foot in front of the other, ignoring the few bodies of villains she saw in the distance as she walked. Over the gunfire and yelling and smoke, Momo felt like the last 10 minutes had taken an eternity as she kept using her various tools and gadgets. Web grenades, smoke bombs, anything. She looked, seeing her mother panting against her cover as she grabbed a piece of steak and gnashed on it, bullets flying overhead. The onslaught of gear she had given to the guests behind their own cover had stopped, leaving just them. Mother was breathing heavily. Her quirk needed iron to function, and she has used up a lot of it. There was a rumble, a crash, and for a moment, everyone didn't move. IAM. A muffled sound before someone screamed. Free. Like a mortar shot, a blue and red form burst through the floor of the doorway. A dozen guns turned to the great dust cloud. There was a surge of wind, and faster than Momo could even blink, All Might was standing in the middle of their room, the remaining mercenaries unmoving at his feet. The men groaned, slumped to the ground thanks to the well-placed kidney shots. Momo couldn't help it. She laughed, and she wasn't the only one. Several of the guests whooped and hollered as the #1 hero took stock of the situation from a better perspective. I'm more sorry than words can describe, leaving you to fight this battle without me, but worry not. These villains will not remain for much longer. Most of the crowd behind her cheered in relief and joy at the sound of the promise. All Might Sensei, Momo called. The blonde hero's eyes widened slightly. What is it? Parker, Midoriya, Hatsune, Todoroki and his sister may be here in this facility, and they may have caused some of the mercs outside to leave. It's the only hunch I can assume as to why some of the mercs who attacked us weren't as large in number. They may be somewhere in the building, if you can. I can confirm that young Midoriya and the Todorokis are here. I will find them, all of them, and put them out of harm's way as fast as I can, All Might promised, putting an assuring giant hand on her shoulder. Momo felt her shoulders relax, but only for a moment as All Might straightened. Now everyone out and get to the first floor as fast as you can. I handled the villains on my way here. Not a single person complained, and not a single person stopped to ask what was going to happen. All Might, please stop, said a female voice, making them pause and look up at the speakers outside of the ballroom. Momo trotted out, as did All Might. Who is speaking? All Might demanded. Are you the security system of the island? It had the same tone and accent that the public announcement had when the villains took over, but the manner of speaking was desperate, not like a controlled AI. All Might, Midoriya and Todoroki are at the top floor of the tower fighting against the boss of the villains who attacked this place. They are with David Shield, his daughter, and Todoroki's sister too. Leave Parker and Hatsune to me. I'm sending medical drones to their position in the server room. Medical? Are they hurt? Momo asked, concern gripping her chest. Parker is a little beat up, but don't worry. All Might, go to the vault at the top floor. From what I can see from the cameras, Midoriya and Todoroki won't last. All Might winced. Momo perked up. The server room. Was that how All Might was freed? It had to be with Peter and Hatsune coming through in the clutch. What about the other mercs? I'm surprised we got so few attacking us. Maya spoke for the first time. She didn't seem too fazed by the luster of the #1 hero. Oh, that. Gawa. What the hell? Yelled the giant rock monster man as he fell to the ground. Countless drones converging and hosing him down with hardening foam as they seemed to swarm around Endeavor in the burnt hellscape that was the outside of I Tower. The other villains he couldn't defeat right off the bat were also being chased down, and the red glow the security drones had were gone, replaced by a blue light. He looked at the tower and saw the metal walls beginning to recede, revealing the inside of the building. What was all that about? It's handled. I am impressed with Endeavor. He took care of quite a few of those mercs. I count. Over 30 and not a scratch on him. Momo had to cock an eyebrow. It sounded like the Pa voice, but it sure sounded a little casual. Too much so. Endeavor is here. Alright, time for our counterattack. All Might declared. Young Yaoyorozu, I will be right back. Sensei, it will be alright. All Might turned. Because I am here. And he charged, disappearing in a burst of speed heading towards the stairwell. Momo felt a hand on her shoulder and turned, seeing Maya look at her with a determined look on her face. Come, let's see your father, he should be alright. Momo nodded, fighting back a smile as she and her mother began running towards the area of the first floor, moving past multiple unconscious mercenaries. As the metal doors vanished underground, numerous drones navigated past many of the people down there who looked on in confusion as they searched the building. Izuku could barely see through the sweat and the pain. Every muscle burned, every inch of him ached, but somehow, One for All kept his body moving. Around him, the vault was a shell of its former self. Pillars of steel, glaciers of ice, blasts of wind and shots of fire had reduced most of the material around them into nothingness. Yet Wolfram still stood above them, a monolith of steel under him to let him see both Izuku and Shoto. The son of Endeavor was breathing hard as he tried to summon another blast of power. It probably wouldn't work, There was tons of steel for the mad villain to use whenever he wished. The only true solace was the simple fact that Melissa, David, and Fayumi were outside the room and making distance. Izuku saw another surging steel tendril, avoiding it as he noticed another being sent at Shoto. The dual-haired boy had conjured another thick ice wall, only for the steel pillar to burst through it and impact close by. Shoto was only able to avoid getting crushed by dodging to the side. "You damn brats ruined it," yelled Wolfram as Izuku weaved through the jungle of iron columns, ignoring the pain in his hand from 2 broken fingers. He saw that Wolfram was still holding the briefcase that was now in tatters, and with it, some kind of destroyed headgear. He turned, snarling and roaring as he slammed his hands down, which caused steel pillars to erupt like Shizaki's vines. Izuku's body glowed with one for all as he weaved through them, narrowly dodging each one as he leapt up above the forest of metal. He could see Wolfram looking at him, his coat in shreds and wearing only his Kevlar armor as his hands glowed blue, yellow eyes alight with rage. Izuku lifted his hand, ring finger primed. Sma he attempted, but his aim was off, Izuku having been slammed by a pillar and sent crashing into the wall, the giant mass shifting to trap him. Izuku saw stars and felt pain surge throughout his body. A wall of ice crashed into the side of the metal tendril, bending it just enough for Izuku to get free. He got to his feet, standing next to Shoto, the other boy's body shivering for a moment before steam emitted from his right side. He breathed hard, looking and seeing the dual-haired boy looking back and nodding. Izuku took off, and Shoto followed suit on the other side, surfing along the wall as Izuku jumped and weaved over the various steel beams. The two began to arc in towards the villain in a pincer. Wolfram snarled and slammed his hands against the wall behind him, steel pillars roaring out at both of them at high speed. Izuku raised his right hand, bringing his index and middle fingers together as they flowed against his thumb. He would still have his left hand to take care of him. Smash! Izuku roared, and a double flick sent hurricane force winds at Wolfram, throwing him into the wall as the man seemed to roar in pain. Izuku slid back down along the beam but recovered and charged his quirk through his body to force on through. Had to take him out now. Shoto had conjured another miniature glacier to stall the pillar onslaught. He rose above it and fired a gout of flame down at the metal user. Wolfram got out of the man-shaped steel hole, letting out a roar as he slammed the ground, steel rods racing out at the boy after he dodged the massive fire blast. Right into Izuku's path, his left arm reared back. He fought through the pain in his right hand and came in with a haymaker, teeth grit and letting out a closed-mouth battle cry. Wolfram's skin turned orange again, and Izuku's fist met his jaw as the man staggered back, only for him to touch the superheated wall thanks to Shoto's flame. Iron lashed out, slamming into Izuku as he yelled in pain, feeling his arms being burnt by the hot steel as he was sent into a steel wall, slumping to the ground. Izuku saw nothing but stars as he raised his left hand to fire another flick, only for his whole body to be encased in an iron cocoon, Izuku yelping as he was lifted up. He turned, seeing Shoto had suffered a similar fate with his body being pinned against the wall. Wolfram was a disheveled mess, his skin glowing as his normal sharp yellow eyes seemed to almost glow as he had his hands on the floor, the blue lightning arcing along the steel towards them. And then Izuku felt the squeeze like a vice. He arched his back and yelled, his broken fingers caught in some steel as he heard Shoto follow suit. What with him being trapped against a press, his arms were tightening against his ribs, and it hurt to even breathe. Shoto and Izuku couldn't retort, their screaming intensifying as the pressure mounted. Shoto roared, ice surging around him and towards the villain. With a battle cry, Wolfram rounded on the glacier, punching it as his body glowed orange. In the distance something exploded, a flash of heat that Izuku couldn't place. Your little ice tricks won't do you any good, and I doubt you'll want to use that fire lest you burn yourself alive. Wolfram sneered, smirking down at Shoto who was submerged in a glacier save for his arms and upper body, the ice cracking as the pillar began to move again. I'm gonna enjoy killing you little shits, Wolfram hissed. Then, I'll be sure to put another bullet in that white-haired whore for burning my face, this time in her head. In one instant, a massive hand clamped down on Wolfram's shoulder. Huh? The villain turned, just so he could see 5 knuckles fill his vision. Something cracked as the villain flew down, barely managing to catch himself before he crashed against the ground below. He looked up, hand on a bloody nose with widened eyes. Endeavor floated there, jets of red-hot flame jetting out of his feet, steel melted into slag behind him. D-dad. Shoto breathed in disbelief. The number 2 hero didn't look down at his son, his fiery gaze solely on Wolfram. Shoto couldn't remember the last time that his father looked so angry. I must have misheard you. Endeavor snarled in English, his teeth bared. His pupils were pinpricks in his eyes, a rictus of pure rage as he planted his boots on the ground and stalked forward. Maybe you'd like to repeat that so I can make sure. Wolfram backed away, visibly afraid now. One touch, and the wall behind Endeavor started rushing towards him. Only he wasn't there. The burning hero shot forward, fire sending him straight towards Wolfram. The villain tried to put a line of metal between him and his enemy, but Hellflame cut through the metal like a hot knife through butter. Molten slag hit Endeavor's shoulder as he pushed through, ignoring it so he could grab hold of Wolfram's glowing orange face. He threw his hand forward, and Wolfram's head met metal. And even then Endeavor didn't let him rest. He spun, faster than his bulk reasonably should allow him to, dragging the villain's face along the side of the wall before throwing him like a fastball. Wolfram landed hard on the metal floor, barely 10 feet from Shoto and Izuku. He rose to his feet, but before he could do much more than suck down a wheezing breath, Endeavor's fist crashed into his cheek and Izuku heard something break. The man flopped like a dead fish on the floor, only for both of Endeavor's hands to grab hold of his skull and pull him up, to stare straight into his wide eyes. Wolfram's skin turned red, his muscles suddenly bulking up as Izuku shouted out a belated warning. The villain punched Endeavor square in the jaw. It was a blow that should have put anyone down considering the unnatural strength Wolfram had displayed before, but Endeavor did little more than stumble, losing his grip as his head whipped to the side before returning with a roar and a devastating counterpunch that crunched into the villain's already broken nose, sending him flipping end over end before he hit the wall with a crash. Endeavor moved forward as Wolfram swayed on unsteady, shaky legs. Kali, Wolfram's head darted about while Izuku and Shoto perked up, looking up at the glass ceiling above them. FORNIAAA. No, Wolfram's voice was laced with fear as he slammed the ground with his hands, steel pillars erupting from all sources. The floor, the walls, even the former steel walls and pillars he'd made before were contributing. His skin glowed orange, near red as power flowed through him. NOOO. Then they roared upward, like serpents reaching to the sky as the glass was shattered from on high. SMAASH. The steel pillars were obliterated, and a big blue meteor crashed through, diving into Wolfram, fist outstretched as the vault floor cratered into the previous floor, denting as steel walls and pillars warped. Izuku and Shoto remained locked in place, wind gusting around them. The adrenaline and jubilee of it all made Izuku ignore the pain as he saw the sight before him. At the center of the crater, Wolfram was present, mouth agog, eyes white as he lay still in unconsciousness. And rising above, the symbol of peace, who was gone. And Izuku felt himself be freed as he was lifted in All Might's embrace. On the other arm, Shoto was present too. "You two crazy kids," All Might said softly, his strong arms holding them softly. "You did well, better than what I could ever do at your age. But rest assured." Izuku felt grateful despite his difficulty in drawing a full breath, and he had a feeling Shoto was the same way as he saw All Might's determined blue eyes looking down at them with that big grin. It will be all right now. Izuku knew what was coming, but he couldn't contain his joy and relief, even as he heard the sounds of medical drones and security drones surging past along the floor into the ruined and carnage-laden vault. "Because I am here. You're late, you idiot," Endeavor shouted. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 18. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.